Dr. Sifiso, over to you.
Alô, conseguem me ouvir? As pessoas que falam português, eu sou interpretador em português, podem escrever no chat se conseguem ouvir a minha voz.
Thank you so much for that, IT. A very good morning to all that are in attendance and a very warm welcome to this regional dialogue of FANRPAN. My name is Fiso. Ndombela is my surname. I work for the National Agricultural Marketing Council, which is one of the institutions of the state in South Africa operating in the agricultural space. Today, I will be your facilitator for this morning session and the subsequent session that are coming up. And I would like to extend my very warm welcome to the board chairman of FANRPAN, Dr. Theo De Jagat, who will be with us this morning. Warm welcome to you, sir. A very warm welcome to also the CEO of this FANRPAN, as well as the president or the head of the mission of FANRPAN, Dr. Chilitsi Mazondravila. I call him the commissioner, as he's one of the leading commissioners in terms of the planning for our country in South Africa. I would like to also extend a very warm welcome to all the FANRPAN country nodes across the African country, as we know that the FANRPAN operate through different node hosts in different countries. In particular, I would like to recognize Mr. Bonane Nyodo, who is a country node for the FANRPAN in South Africa. I'm specifically elevating him because that's where my passport is held. So I need to make sure that I recognize that organization. I would like to also extend a very warm welcome to Ms. Tembi, the Director of Policy at FANRPAN, also be one of our speakers this morning. A warm welcome to all the partners as well as the collaborators and sponsors that are working with FANRPAN in various policy advocacy, research, as well as the different networking system that they operate within our African continent. A warm welcome to all the participants that are here today. And I promise you, it will be one of the fascinating policy dialogue that we'll have. We have a very beautiful lineup that is well vested in different areas of food system and climate, as well as the policy in the continent of Africa. Today's dialogue is really focusing on how different policies and different actions will be upscaled to drive a resilient African food system, and unpacking some of the solutions that can be upscaled and the lesson learned in different parts of our continent in ensuring that we drive the resilient African food systems. It also come this year's dialogue at a time when we are at the tail end of the FANRPAN strategy that focus on building a resilient African agri-food system. And so today, really what we are expecting is listening to the different experts, as well as the policymakers, as well as also the other non-actors or policymakers in the food system on what are the bottlenecks that we're still facing within the African food system. And what lessons can we learn and share in terms of strengthening the food systems and building the resilience that we've seen affecting our African food system. Recently, we have seen some of the countries putting measures in place and recovering from the effects of the pandemic that really disturbed and interrupted the supply of food within the continent. As we know, some of our countries, our state within the continent are food importers, so they depend largely on an efficient and open trade system that allows the distribution of food across the different corners of our continent. But while other countries were starting now to recover from that, we've seen the advent of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, which really impacted the cost of living in the African continent, impacting the rise of imports such as your fertilizers and some of the strategic commodities that form the base of the food basket, which are your wheat, plant-based cooking oil, and other commodities that were impacted. Ladies and gentlemen, as I've promised earlier on today, that these are some of the areas of then understanding within these different external shocks, and how do we then build it as we continue to see the changes of climate and building up into COP27 of what are those areas that will have to be upscaled, and different partners can elevate them into forming some of the areas that are taken by our policymakers. I would like to just remind you that this is one of the very important platform that provides an opportunity, not only just to the policymakers, but also to those critical players that play an important role in generating information that can build and create an evidence-based policymaking. And that's what FANRPAN really comes out very handy in all the last 22 years when they've been hosting this regional policy dialogue and really unpacking the richness of the research as well as the lessons that are learned across the different areas. With those few opening remarks of mine, allow me, ladies and gentlemen, to now invite our CEO, Dr. Chiliti. But before I just ask him just few house rules, just to plead with all the that are in attendance. I do believe that we do have the language services, translation language services for those that want to listen into French and other important languages that we use often on our daily lives within the African continent. And those that are not on the podium, if they could ensure that they switch off their, or they keep muted, so that we allow space and time and ensure that we listen carefully into the speakers. To all the speakers that will be speaking today, I would like them to just keep it within the limited time. I have been told that if we become very disciplined in time, there are some goodies and some also reward that will be given at the end of the session. So we look forward into that. With those ones, please, Mr. Dr. Zibandela, could you please take the floor?
Thank you so much, Dr. Ntombela. But I really need to acknowledge you for providing the background or the preamble to the policy dialogue, but more so for accepting the role of facilitating today's session. Then we always call upon you to provide this role, and for that we appreciate. So for me, let me start by acknowledging all the participants, and maybe to say that the FANRPAN board chairperson, Dr. Theo Diache, is the convener, and therefore I will yield to him to do three things. The first one is to establish protocol, and two is to share the dialogue theme and relevance thereof, and three, to declare the policy dialogue officially opened. So that I will not do, but I will hand over to my boss to do that, and I know that he will do that diligently. So, ladies and gentlemen, mine is to welcome you. And I know that Dr. Ntombela already then has done part of that. And for that, then I'll be very brief. So I thank you so much for being our guest for the next coming 3 days starting today. I am looking forward to your participation and your valuable contribution. It is that time of the year where as FANRPAN and as a network, we convene the regional multi-stakeholder policy dialogue. And to underscore, this is a high-level event we always look forward to each year and every year. And to also buttress what Dr. Ntombela said, we have been convening this policy dialogue since 2001. And for every year, we have not missed a year. However, to note is that since 2010, due to COVID, we have been convening the policy dialogue virtual in nature. And I look forward to the day in which we're still gonna meet in person, because there is something that we cannot take away from human beings, and that is the social nature of us to want to meet and to see each other face to face. This is an inclusive dialogue, and I want to urge you that each stakeholder voice matters. And for that, you really need to represent the constituents. And when you do that, you need to do it well. So we don't wish to leave no one behind. So this is your platform, then you really need to be part of it and to make sure that you contribute. The three things that I want to front load as a preamble to my welcome remarks is that we are doing this to deliver on the call by ministers. And this was made back in 1994, calling for the establishment of FANRPAN. We have been called to do policy research analysis, and this is to generate research-based evidence, and to do capacity strengthening for both individuals and institutions. And to emphasize here, this is to enable implementation of credible policies and programs. Number 3 is to conduct policy advocacy and dialogue. What we are doing today is part of this strategic focus area number 3, which is about dialoguing, debating to make sure that we are advocating for those solutions which we know that they will make a difference. Making a difference in terms of making sure that the programs, the policies that are being implemented, they are delivering impact which is deep and also impact which is wider, benefiting the majority. FANRPAN Board Chair, our theme for this year is Resilient African Food Systems, and it's about solutions for climate change, livelihoods, food and nutrition security. And this aligns well with the FANRPAN third generation strategy, which we have started in 2016, and we are about to finish it now, then towards the end of 2023. And when we talk about this topic, it's still then relevant to how we are delivering. We plan to deliver this year's dialogue through 3 segments, and those then have been punctuated by a very deserving themes. So day 1, which is today, we're going to dialogue on pathways to accelerating climate resilience. Then tomorrow, then we're going to shift to discuss issues that deals with how then do we move to sustainable and healthier diets. And we're going to conclude our dialogue in day 3, discussing how can we strengthen institutions and systems to make sure that the food systems that we seek to deliver is resilient. To underscore, board chair and colleagues, we are about providing solutions. And I will repeat, we are about providing solutions. And the theme of the dialogue is also talking about providing that solutions. So the question from my side is, what are those drivers of change that we need to implement, monitor to make sure that there's progress? Program director, without any further ado, then let me now invite our board chair, Dr. Theo Diake, to deliver his opening remarks. With those few words, I thank you.
Thank you very much. Dear Chairperson of the session, dear representatives of the regional economic communities, dear representative of national governments, dear representatives of our partner organizations who have made this dialogue a reality, all our speakers, all our panelists, facilitators and the rapporteurs for the next 3 days, and all our esteemed participants, given your different roles and responsibilities within the food, agriculture, and natural resources policy space. And dear CEO and Head of Mission of FANRPAN, and your team at the Regional Secretariat and the National Policy Nodes, dear ladies and gentlemen, I'm really honored to welcome you to this our 2022 Regional Multi-Stakeholder Policy Dialogue and to deliver a few opening remarks. I've only held this chair for the last 2 months. I succeeded Professor Stidi Oshu, and I will really not do my job properly if I do not acknowledge the wonderful work she has done over the last 3 years while she headed up the FANRPAN board. Professor Oshu is the president and the founder of the Oshu Foundation in Nigeria. And we need to thank her at this dialogue also for the sterling stewardship of this network. She led us through the COVID-19 pandemic. And just when we thought we saw the new light of dawn, we were hit by monkeypox, by a war between Russia and the Ukraine, and a number of natural disasters all over our continent. And whilst many other similar organizations suffered through COVID, and many of our organizations in the food and ag space simply did not survive COVID, FANRPAN excelled under her leadership. And we want to sincerely thank her for that. As our CEO and head of mission have just stated, our dialogue theme for this year is resilient African food systems, solutions for climate change, livelihoods, food and nutrition security. Now, if COVID and the war in the Ukraine did nothing else, they emphasized the importance and the urgency of this debate on our continent today. Let us be very clear about this. There will be no resilience in African food systems and no solutions for climate change, livelihoods, and food and nutrition security if we do not have a better alignment in the policy space. Policies are at the very foundation of achieving what we need to do as the most urgent challenge of our generations. And we are having these deliberations in the same year as we have our second African COP, COP27, which is about 2 months away and is due for Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. I really wish that in the next 3 days and during all our deliberations, in all the plans we make, and in all the alignment we bring about on policies, we can also address this pertinent question: how do we make sure that Sharm el-Sheikh will be a true African COP? Well, to do that, we need common positions. And our deliberations over the next 3 years is all about exactly that. So tackling Africa's key challenges, climate change and malnutrition, has been at the center of the FANRPAN strategic plan, which came about in 2016 and which will come to an end in 2023, next year. I'm so glad to note that this strategic decision to focus on the 2 challenges back then is as relevant as it was even today. They say when you fight a bear, the fight is not over when you are tired. We must keep on fighting for the people on our continent, for their food security. We must fight the dragon of poverty and hunger until we are in the position to be heading. And we can do it through agriculture, because there is no sector of the economy of our continent which can create more wealth in a shorter space of time and on a broader basis than agriculture can. Whilst at the moment it seems that the effects of both climate change and malnutrition has been worsened by the emergence of the new shocks, the war in Russia, Ukraine, and the COVID-19 pandemic. We just need a more coordinated approach to addressing these challenges so that we can succeed in building the resilience of our smallholder farmers to the effects of these challenges. It calls for comprehensive sectoral transformation. Because, ladies and gentlemen, what we have at the moment on this continent is not working for us. We need agricultural transformation, and that transformation must create wealth where it is needed most, in the poorer areas, in the deep rural areas of our continent. in the FANRPAN family, we keep saying to ourselves, we really have everything which money cannot buy. We have the soils, we have the climate, we have the people, we have the water. What we need can be brought about by proper, smart, and wise investment, the linkages to markets, the access to the latest technologies, the expertise, the experience. Since 2014, when our government signed the Malabo Declaration and made commitments aimed at delivering the much needed transformation, it is really unfortunate that we have generally performed dismally. The mere fact that our governments have signed Malabo Declaration have shown the world that the political will is there. But we truly need to do something desperate about the implementation. The initial sense of urgency has dissipated. And here, I specifically want to address those participants who fit the bill as non-state actors in our debates, because I sincerely believe that the bill is squarely in our courts. And now I'm talking about the farmers' organizations, the foundations, the civil society actors. You see, what we need to accomplish will not be accomplished by just waiting for it to happen. Our goals is not a wagon of which we can just release the brake and it will run downhill by itself. It's a wheelbarrow. Somebody needs to pick it up and push it, or it will get nowhere. And I think that the pushing from the non-state actors can actually bring enough energy into the policy maker space to ensure that we have proper implementation. And therefore, I sincerely hope that today's session and those over the next 2 days will be bold steps towards that multifaceted collaboration between state and non-state actors. And I'm convinced that this dialogue will result in an enhanced level of awareness and engagement on the key food and natural resources issues which we face as a continent. I'm confident that the deliberations from this dialogue will inform the position of Africa's climate change negotiators on food and ag systems and climate change, also at COP27. And having said that, it's my privilege to declare this dialogue open. And I would like to congratulate and thank all of you, the partners of FANRPAN, our CEO and head of mission and his team, for delivering against the network's mandate. It is for FANRPAN to convene the platforms, such as this one, and enable the different stakeholders to push the agricultural and food systems transformation agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tejaga, for those welcome remarks and officially declaring the dialogue closed. I think you've made a very important points during your opening. With those words, may I then ask Ms. Tembi to come on the floor? The chairman has just told me that he expropriated 2 minutes of your time, so we will have those times given to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Ntombela. I wonder if you can see my screen.
Yes, I can see it. I hope everyone can.
Okay, and I'm hoping you're seeing the program for the dialogue.
That is correct.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone who's joining, depending on where you're coming from. And thank you so much for joining us for this year's FANRPAN Annual Regional Policy Dialogue. Mine is really a quick one to just walk you through the next 3 days, what we are going to be focusing on, and to also just encourage you that as many as we are right now, I think we're sitting at 84 participants. We would also love to have you join us on day 2 and on day 3. Today, we are focusing on accelerating climate resilience, and we are going to really, after the session, get into the meat of things and have an in-depth discussion on climate impacts on Africa's food systems. This day has been convened in partnership with Climb It, our very good friends who are championing climate change action in as far as agriculture and food systems are concerned. So we are also very grateful for the collaboration and would like to welcome the team from Climb It that has also joined us. We are going to, after the session, we'll have a group photo and we'll have a bit of a showcase on FANRPAN, which will then be followed by some remarks from our co-conveners. Dr. Bruce Campbell is going to share with us why we have come together and why we're working together. And then we're going to get into a keynote presentation that we are going to receive from Dr. Inga Jacobs-Mata from the International Water Management Institute, after which we'll get some reflections from the private sector, from our good friends at the Southern Africa Business Development Forum. You'll agree with me that often dialogues and discussions like this one sometimes leave out the private sector, but we felt that it was important that as we discuss building resilience of our food systems, we also have to bring the private sector so that they are also part of the conversation. We are then going to have a discussion segment where you as the participants will have an opportunity to ask those pertinent questions and to also share a bit on what you are doing with regards to addressing climate impacts on Africa's food systems. We are then going to have a short transition period where we'll receive an overview of FANRPAN's climate smart agriculture initiatives from Ms. Shiluba Nkanyane. It's going to be a quick presentation, which will then lead us to our parallel sessions. The breakout sessions where we would have a focus on gender and youth. We'll then have a focus on financing climate action in Africa, and then also a focus on adaptation and resilience. So we are also collaborating with some of our key partners as well, with the United Nations Youth Constituency, as well as IAS. We have colleagues from Morocco that are representing IAS who will be taking a lead in that gender and youth session. And for our financing climate action, we have collaborated with Trust Africa, and we've got colleagues from who are part of the Trust Africa network that will also be leading us through that and sharing their presentations. We're also going to hear and receive a presentation from the Common Market for East and Southern Africa on their resilience strategy. After that, we are then going to come back for a sort of plenary feedback, because since we'll be in parallel sessions, we won't have an opportunity maybe to listen to what other groups are discussing, but the feedback during the plenary session will give us an opportunity to also have an appreciation of what would have been discussed in the other groups. After that, we're going to come back and have a session that's going to be focusing on the road to COP27, looking at what is at stake for Africa. Here, we're going to have a discussion first on the placing of agriculture within the broader UNFCCC negotiations, a bit of where agriculture was in Glasgow last year at COP26 and what to expect for COP27. We're also going to receive a presentation on the key priorities for Africa from the African group of negotiators, and that will then bring the day to a close. We'll have a roundup of the day from our moderator, and we then break. Tomorrow, we shift gears and we come back looking at shifting to sustainable and healthier diets. So this session is being convened in collaboration with the University of Pretoria And we have Prof. Joyce Kinabo from the Sokoina University of Agriculture being the facilitator for the day. We are going to receive a number of presentations from colleagues at the University of Pretoria, from colleagues at the University of Ghana, as well as from the Bureau of Food and Agriculture Policy for that morning session. After which we will receive a presentation on FANRPAN's nutrition sensitive agriculture initiatives. And then we will get into a stakeholder voices session, where we are also again going to break out and address some key questions that are going to sort of put us in the right framing of what needs to be done for us to shift to sustainable diets. After that, we are going to then come back into the plenary and have a feedback session, and then we have a conclusion of the day. Our final day, which is day 3, is going to be on Thursday, and we'll be focusing on strengthening institutions and systems for resilient food systems. Here, we have convened this day in collaboration with our partners at the Africa Capacity Building Foundation, ACBF. And this day is really focusing on what capacities in terms of human, in terms of other resources are needed for us to actually deliver resilient food systems. So we are going to have keynote presentations, panel discussions, and we are also then going to have a stakeholder voices session as well that will get more voices, get us talking. The dialogue is really not about just presentations, but it's about also discussions and making sure that we are hearing as many voices as possible. And after the stakeholder voices, we'll then have the closing session of the dialogue, which will then sort of have a summary of the 3 days that we are going to be spending together. So I really hope that everybody is going to stay with us for the 3 days, and that the discussions are going to be really fruitful, and we are going to get a lot of lessons and a lot of opportunities for us to be able to work together to transform our food systems. Mr. Chair, thank you. I hand back over to you.
Thank you so much, Tembi, for that. As I've seen, I think you have now taken the care of the sack, giving us a really flavor of what's in store for us for the next 3 days. I really look forward to it, and I definitely certain that most of the colleagues that are on the call will be able to stay with us till the end of the day, as you have articulated. I want to invite quickly the colleague, I don't know if it's with us, to just guide us quickly on how do we take a group photo and at the same time prepare that FANRPAN video for us. Kanto, I don't know if you are here. I'm told you have some very interesting ideas on how you want us to be posing in this new world we found ourselves in, where we take a photo through this digital platform. If I can just give you a second to explain that to us and guide us of what to do as we take the photo.
All right, thank you, Dr. Sifiso. I'm going to ask Tembi as well to help me. So after the video, we're going to play the video, the FANRPAN video first. So we want everyone to prepare a piece of paper with a word on it around accelerating climate resilience. What is the word that speaks up to you? So on a piece of paper, when you will be asked to share your views, or just one word, write it in bold. You will be asked to turn on your video and then show it to the camera. So that's how you're going to share it, and don't hide your face, but smile with that piece of paper. So you will have to do that after the video. Thank you, Dr. Sifiso.
All right.
The Food, Agriculture and Natural Resources Policy Analysis Network, or FANRPAN, is an all-inclusive, multi-stakeholder Pan-African network with a mandate to conduct and coordinate agricultural policy research and analysis, to promote and disseminate relevant evidence-based research results, to inform policy across Africa, and to act as a platform for dialogue and engagement of stakeholders from the food, agriculture, and natural resources sector. Our mission is to build resilient food systems across Africa through the creation, implementation, and assessment of food, agriculture, and natural resources policies that are both evidence-based and developed in partnership with both state and non-state actors. Our strategy is centered on three mutually supported thrusts: policy research and analysis, capacity strengthening, and policy advocacy. Through ongoing research in each of these thrusts, we conduct studies addressing national and regional trends and challenges, while also providing a basis for cross-country comparative analyses of the effects of different policies on development outcomes. In conjunction with our partners and network members, we provide policy advisory services to policymakers, drawing upon existing research evidence and knowledge to address specific policy questions and decisions. We achieve this by carrying out mutually agreed collaborative research activities with partners, publishing and disseminating research results, providing technical support to national and regional programs, providing opportunities for training and professional development, organizing policy dialogues, workshops, scientific conferences, and seminars, facilitating linkages and partnerships amongst institutions with related policy research and professional development activities. FANRPAN is a multi-tiered network consisting of a regional secretariat and established national nodes in 17 African countries in East, Southern, and West Africa. Whilst the nodes attend to national policy issues, it is equally important that the evidence from FANRPAN's research efforts inform regional and continental policy processes. To this end, FANRPAN works with regional economic communities which include the Economic Community of West African States, the East African Community, the Southern African Development Community, and the Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa, ultimately feeding into the African Union Commission processes. Our network's expansion is driven by collaborating and partnering with like-minded entities, reaching out to government departments responsible for food, agriculture, and natural resources, and by working with parliamentarians, research and pharma organizations, the private sector, civil society organizations, development partners, and the media. We have led and continue to lead several highly successful food, agriculture, and natural resources research, policy advocacy, and capacity strengthening initiatives in Africa. FANRPAN works with and through other like-minded institutions to create appropriate evidence-based policies in the food, agriculture, and natural resources sector. Join us as we build resilient African agriculture and food systems, securing prosperity and health in the region.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. Can then everybody put on their video and then have one word as instructed? I hope I can see mine. Then you'll guide us, Kanto.
All right, everyone. Wow, nice pictures. Yeah, thank you, everyone. So please show your word, and we are going to take a picture. Share your smile as well. Don't forget to smile because we want climate resilience, in Africa. So please share your smile. Thank you. Wow, the words are wow. We see resilience, we see ambition, we see fortification.
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
Siri is even speaking, guys. Okay, we see farmers, implementation. Wow. Thank you, everyone. This is great. We all want Africa, right, to be the leaders in agriculture. Thank you, everyone. We got the picture. Over to you, Dr. Sifiso.
Thank you so much for that, and thank you for that very informative video. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now heading into our first main session of the day, which is really unpacking some of those solutions that both Dr. Diaga as well as the CEO were unpacking as the session that is aimed at creating and finding those practical solutions to areas that will help the continent to improve its climate resilience. The session's name is called Climate Impact on Africa's Food Systems, and our first remarks will be coming from Dr. Bruce. I would like to therefore welcome Dr. Bruce and give you the opportunity to share your remarks. Thank you so much.
Hi, everybody. It's coming through clearly?
I can hear you very well, Doc. Do you want to flag your presentation?
No, I don't have a presentation. I'll just give some opening words.
All right. Very
so I'll be very brief. I want to just talk something about the urgency, something about poverty. I want to look at 3 areas where I think we need, and then end with some ways that I think we should be working. So just in terms of the climate emergency, I recently looked at some data from Zimbabwe. Pre and post 1980, the temperatures have risen by about 1 degree. And the prediction is that it's going to go 2 to 3 degrees warmer. There's already shorter growing seasons and the drying out of the country. And the prediction is more droughts going forward. I worked the longest in Zimbabwe, and one area that we worked in southern Zimbabwe has now been reclassified in terms of its agricultural potential because of already climate change. Parts of the country have now been reclassified where they do not believe cropping can now take place. Now, 2100 seems to be far away, but actually my grandchild will experience that climate. So there's some real urgency in terms of tackling this climate emergency. I wanted to say something about poverty. If you look at the maps of poverty and climate vulnerability, they're almost identical. And so poverty alleviation has to be a crucial piece of our work. And this means thinking much broader than just climate always. We have to think about markets, incomes, getting farmers having a proper livelihood. Which 3 areas do I think are really crucial to focus on? So I don't believe in these silver bullets. So even if I mention 3, it's going to take much more than 3 areas. But the first area is related to the private sector. Now, we often look towards climate finance, development finance for doing things, doing projects. For me, that is really a hopeless strategy. The climate finance in Africa is currently in the low billions, and perhaps it'll grow, but it will always be in the billions. Whereas the food system in Africa is going to be $1 trillion business. This means that the focus should really be on growing local and national markets and interregional trade. In the next 8 years, there's going to be 200 million more people in urban areas in Africa. It's a huge opportunity for farmers and for private sector approaches to dealing with resilience. So that's the first area. The second area is digitalization. There's 50 million farms in Africa. If we're going to achieve anywhere near the SDGs by 2030, which is very difficult to imagine, we have to digitalize. We have to work with, and we can't expect all farmers to be having smartphones tomorrow. We have to be working with the extension services in terms of digitalizing them. with producer organizations. So digitalization is really important. And the third area, and I'm glad I'm speaking before Inga actually, and I didn't know Inga was on the program, but it is water. So, and in particular, irrigation. So one way of building resilience is to have more secure water supplies. And globally, 20% of cropland is irrigated. In Africa, it's only 5%. And the work of IMI has shown that we can have 14 million hectares more irrigated land today, if we could do it profitably and sustainably. And if we can grow markets even more in Africa, we could potentially go up to 40 to 100 million more hectares of land. So those are my three areas where I think we need focus on: private sector, digitalization, and water irrigation. Then the last piece, how should we be working? And this is where I see FANRPAN as a real crucial partner also with Climate. We really believe in brokering knowledge and getting science-based targets and science-based action happening. We've been hosting multi-stakeholder dialogues, which are dominated by farmers' organizations. And it's really interesting to see their perspectives and to understand what needs to be done. But I think we have to go a little bit more ambitious than dialogues. And I think that the result that we should be achieved is deals which have action on the ground. And I'll just give you one example. So, for example, with these farmers' organizations, widespread frustration on input subsidies. So is the next step not getting together with the finances, the private sector, the farmers' organizations, the government, and really getting deals in place to rethink input subsidies and to then implement them? And I think for those kinds of policy dialogues, it has to be very specific to the key change makers. So I end with that. Let's move from dialogues to deals to actions. Thanks very much.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Bruce. I'll definitely take that message forward, that we're moving beyond just the dialogues into deals. Allow me then, ladies and gentlemen, to welcome Dr. Inga to give us a presentation on the climate. Dr. Inga, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Program Director. Let me just, if you just give me 1 minute to share my screen very briefly. Can you confirm that you can see my screen?
I can see your screen. Perhaps maybe you want to put it on the slide mode.
Yes, sure. Great.
Can see it.
Okay. Great. Thank you so much.
Brilliant.
And good morning and good afternoon, colleagues and friends. It's really good to be with you today and share a few insights from, as the board chair put it, a push from a non-state actor.
Inga, it's not on the presentation where we see in your control slides.
Oh gosh. Okay. Good point. Let me change that. How's that?
Better.
That's
yeah.
good.
Okay, great. Thanks. Yes, and thank you, and great to speak after Bruce, because it seems like we're on the same football team. So he passes the ball to me, and I dribble with it for a while, emphasizing quite a few of the same issues that he raised in his opening remarks. So thanks for that. Thanks for that, Bruce. I'm going to talk a little bit about how we unlock African ingenuity in research, SME collaboration, or some people call it the 4Ps, public, private, people partnerships, as a scaling pathway to achieving the resilience that we are looking for in this dialogue over the next few days. So if we are to look at, let me ask you a question. It might be a rhetorical question, but what do you think a microfinance institution, a digital ag platform, and a solar irrigation pump supplier have in common? You can share some ideas in the chat. But these are three SMEs, agri-SMEs working in the agri-food ecosystem that have successfully partnered together to scale what we call bundled climate smart agriculture. And recently, I just read a declaration signed by a few of our agri-food research institutions in Abidjan recently that spoke about this notion of reaching millions of farmers, and that's also what Bruce spoke about. Now we work with these three agribusinesses. They are part of a project that we are implementing at the moment in Zambia, and I'll share a little bit about that. But I wanted to start with these because they really capture the essence of this presentation of mine today, that the innovation that I'm talking about is really trying to have research get a little bit closer to the work of the agribusiness ecosystem and partnering with SMEs. So Bruce very eloquently articulated what the challenge is in our region, and we will certainly in a month's time hear from the Africa group of negotiators or the chief negotiators at COP, who will allude to very similar challenges that Southern Africa or even East Africa is also facing. They will also lament the fact that Africa contributes only 4% of global carbon dioxide emissions, and yet we have to spend about 3 or 4% of our national GDPs to dealing with the impact of that global challenge. We also know that we experience growing severity of floods and droughts in this region, and it has a crippling impact on agriculture production. So you can see there in the bottom of the slide, 34% reduction as a result of rising temperatures. Now, we also know in this region that our science partners, national governments, development partners have been working consistently over several decades on these issues. So there's no shortage of technologies. There's no shortage of products and tools to address these challenges. But our challenge remains, and this is not anything new that I'm saying, our challenge remains: how do we deploy and rapidly scale this in a coordinated and an inclusive manner? Now, also, let me just try to move this word so I can see the top. There we go. Now we have seen, some of you may agree or disagree to the political or the institutional will around accelerated growth for agricultural growth. I mean, the Malabo Declaration, the chairperson mentioned that. Of course, our challenge has always been implementation, right? And sort of keeping pace with the progress that's needed to achieve these targets. We also saw in 2019 the Africa Food Security Leadership Dialogue launched by the World Bank and the African Union Commission and other partners that tried to galvanize action and mobilize financing to address some of these food security challenges. Then the World Bank went a step further, and in 2019 they committed 60 million additional funding for CGIAR and our local partners which Bruce Campbell was actually leading at the time, over 3 decades at the UN Climate Action Summit. And this was specifically to scale climate smart agriculture and enhance the delivery of climate information. So digital agro advisories that Bruce alluded to. Now, more recently still in Africa now this year, the majority of the parties have mentioned agriculture and food security, as well as water, health, disaster risk reduction as all the top priorities for adaptation. Now, what will come out of this Africa COP, I think we can all debate whether this will lead to very real, tangible impacts for Africa and for our region. We wait with bated breath, but perhaps also just knowing, managing our expectations. And we also know that we need some acceleration in terms of CARDIP implementation, right? We almost now in the post-Malabo phase and preparing for that. So there has been some political and institutional will, but not enough. And now moving to, sorry, just get to that. What I would like to propose are just 3 examples of these public-private people partnerships that focus on scaling and how they've done it quite innovatively. Of course, the lessons are being learned, so I also encourage a discussion on what are some of the lessons that you may have experienced in some of the accelerator or incubator work that you've done. So I'm going to just focus my presentation on 3 examples, and the first one is the ICRA Zambia Accelerator. Now, ICRA is this $60 million project funded by the World Bank, International Development Assistance. It works to scale climate smart agriculture, as I said, and climate information services. And it's really working. It's not a conventional research project. It's a scaling project to reach 1.5 million smallholder farmers in Africa. Bruce, you'll be happy to know that as of July 2022, we've already reached 1 million beneficiaries, which is quite a good achievement for those that have been involved. So ICRA works in these 3 regions: East, West, and Southern Africa. And Zambia, of course, is unfortunately our only Southern Africa country, but we support it wholeheartedly. And really trying to support local partners with capacity strengthening, but also agribusiness ecosystems, as our focus is in Zambia around scaling this, different climate smart agriculture in bundles of innovations. Now in Zambia, what we have designed with our partners there are these 4 innovation bundles. The first one is looking at sustainable financing for off-grid solar irrigation. So back to Bruce's point around the need to expand solar irrigation, and this is specifically off-grid. A second bundle of partners looks at how do we scale integrated aquaculture agriculture systems largely in the north of Zambia. A third bundle looks at how do we address drought through climate smart seed varieties. So really looking at the entirety of the seed system, focusing on scaling drought tolerant seeds from and including a whole host of different partners in that space. A fourth one is looking at integrated mixed chicken, goats, or small ruminant agriculture practices. So really sort of combining integrated cropping practices with conservation agriculture there. And then we had a fifth grant that was for best in class. This could be any partnership in one of these 4 bundles, but with the strongest focus on empowering women and youth and other vulnerable groups. So this is what we set up in Zambia, and you can see those 3 partners that I spoke about in the beginning of my presentation. They form the successful partnership scaling off-grid solar irrigation through this digital financing model. Now, on their own, they could reach a couple of thousand, maybe a couple of tens of thousands of farmers, but together they have a really innovative model where Lupia, as a fintech startup, provides financial services to individuals and businesses. Vitalite is the solar pump provider that provides products and services around household or also farm electrification. And then LimaLinks is the digital one-stop shop platform that provides a platform where Vitalite can promote its solar pumps to hundreds of thousands of farmers through a partnership with one of the big mobile technology companies in Zambia. And for those who can't afford it, Lupia comes in and provides the necessary finance to those farmers. So really together they are the they can achieve so much more than on their own. Now as part of this accelerator, we under the ICRA project, we provide scaling grants to these partners of about $50,000 per bundle, and then also very targeted technical assistance. And this can be anything from financial technical assistance, helping partners to access finance, access markets, but it could also be very technical in terms of how do they develop a reporting framework, a monitoring framework to assess the water savings that they would have, for instance, in their business should they adopt solar irrigation. Now you can see that the order to reach the farmers is quite ambitious. So for this $50,000 scaling grant, the partners, the bundles are required to each reach 75,000 farmers in selected provinces and value chains. So that works out roughly, if we look at the numbers, it's about $1 a farmer, which is hardly anything. And if they had to start on their own, they wouldn't achieve much. But because they have these really innovative partnership modalities, they are able to pool their client bases and achieve those very ambitious targets. And so just to very quickly sum up ICRA, the process has gone from this very targeted effort to bundle both innovations and partners. And we spent quite a bit of time on the analysis, the matchmaking for agribusinesses to find each other, because we realized that was also a gap, to then the acceleration and the technical assistance that we are working through at the moment. This is just the picture of the 14 agribusinesses that we've onboarded in Zambia. Now, the next example that I want to share very briefly is the Water and Energy for Food Regional Innovation Hub for Southern and Central Africa. Here we work with partners in a slightly different model, but also providing scaling grants. And here the size is a little bit more substantial, 19.5 million to be exact, for businesses, not in partnership necessarily, it doesn't have to be only, but they need to be able to scale water, energy, and food innovations. And that could be using less water and energy to grow more food, basically. So the approach is quite similar to ICRA: provide direct grants, provide technical assistance to be able to augment those grant funds, and then a very targeted focus around financial assistance, technical capacity, knowledge generation, facilitation, and then also helping agribusinesses navigate the enabling environment. What we realize is many times the bottlenecks are regulatory barriers, licensing, taxation, how to get their product into a new market, given the different licensing and the different import barriers that small businesses face. So that's the focus for We for Food, and it's larger than Zambia. This time it focuses in 12 countries in Southern and Central Africa. Also, again, very ambitious targets, needing to fund 30 of these innovators. In fact, we've onboarded our first cohort of about 11 businesses, from drip irrigation, solar drying, digital platforms, you name it. And now we've actually just closed the second call for innovators that we will be evaluating in the next round. And then the third example that I want to mention, and I will close out with this, is our newest initiative, which we are also very excited about, and we partner with FANRPAN and others on this. And with this, we call Ukama Ustawi. And just for me to take a break talking so much, I've got a video that shows what this is all about. So hopefully you can hear, and we don't have too much issues. Let's give it a shot.
For more than 300 million people in Africa, maize is the most important staple food. It's especially key in Eastern and Southern Africa, where it makes up 30% of daily food intake. While important to many Africans' diets, maize has low nutritional content, is vulnerable to climate change and pests and diseases like fall armyworm. In response to this, the CGIAR has kicked off a regional initiative called Ukama Ustawi, which strives to support a climate-resilient, water-secure and socially inclusive transformation of the region's agricultural sector.
Ukama is a Shona word that refers to humanity's relatedness to each other, so partnerships, how we engage with each other and our biophysical world. Ustawi is a Kiswahili word referring to well-being, prosperity, development. Together, they resemble the essence of what we're trying to do with this initiative.
We're talking about scaling mechanisms, and this would create a sort of enabling environment for the farmers to actually have access to these great innovations, and so that we can actually use it in their fields.
Developed by the region, for the region, Ukama Ustawi demonstrates how, through partnerships, research for development can lead to systemic change and impact on the ground.
Our role as WellFish is in several areas, including the bottlenecks that women, youth and marginalized communities are facing in accessing finance, technologies, in accessing the knowledge that they need in order to be productive farmers.
We visit farmers across the country, we find out what their problems are, and then we bring in the experts from research, development, commercial sector partners to come and solve those problems. In Zambia, we're really excited because we'll be working with SMEs that have gone through an accelerator program. They've been selected and they've got some really good innovations happening on the ground. We'll be working with those SMEs to actually put them on the program. And then when this broadcasts out to millions of farmers, they can get in touch with us to find out more information on a really simple way.
Ukama Ustawi will strengthen agribusiness sustainability by helping unlock private investment and supporting policies that can help improve market access for these farmers.
The project is focused on the maize mix systems of East and Southern Africa, diversifying those systems, intensifying them at the same time, and developing innovation packages that we can deliver to farmers on their farm to help them accomplish to do that.
And what we want to do to support the transformation of food systems for more affordable, sufficient, but also healthy diets, and then produced within planetary boundaries. Maize is a very dominant crop, 35 million hectares in this region. Quite healthy, but not enough. So we need also other crops like legumes, like vegetables, to make it possible also to have an affordable but also healthy diet.
If you want to go fast, you go alone.
If you want to go far, go together.
There it is. So I hope you could hear that okay. But as you can see, U2, as we call it, is basically building. It's building on the model of the ICRA accelerator. It's building on the work that we're doing in We for Food. And it's now expanding into the region as well. So our accelerator under U2 is really trying to facilitate our objective, sorry, is $5 million in additional funding into a portfolio of 30 agribusinesses that we will be supporting. And much like the ICRA Accelerator, except here it's not so much the partners that we fund, we're funding individual agribusinesses, and we're doing it in shorter periods, because what we realize is oftentimes businesses need a short, a very immediate injection to help scale, to assist with working capital, and then the rest they can do on their own. So it's a slightly different model. I don't have time to talk to it too much, but if you are interested to hear more and how you can partner on it, I'd be happy to follow up in discussions. But basically, from these three models that we are working on and that I've shared today, what I can say from the experience is the importance of bundling both innovations and bundling partners as well. So no one business or partner can go at it and achieve on their own. It's really about the makeup of the partnership. So we spend a lot of time working on what makes a successful partnership. The other important lesson that we've learned is that scientific evidence, as much as we'd like to believe otherwise, it is but one of the many evidences used. And this is both humbling for researchers, but it also helps put our research in perspective, making sure that these interventions are very real and relevant, and at the end of the day are private sector facing. So whatever we do in our accelerator, in internship grants, in multi-stakeholder platforms, in feasibility studies, they all need to support and be demanded by the agribusiness ecosystem. And then very lastly, and then Program Director, I promise, hand over to you. Acceleration support has to include finance access support. Bruce mentioned this, and this comes up so much more, that no amount of technical assistance will be adequate if we do not address the market linkages and provide that kind of access to finance, that or at least the pathway, the gateway, the brokerage role to get agribusinesses to that position of being able to access finance. And lastly, what we've seen, I mean, these are only 3 accelerators that I've mentioned now, but there are many, many more in the region. And oftentimes we are supporting the same agribusinesses. So we have this notion of donor darlings. So what we've seen is the need for greater transparency between these programs in terms of who we are funding, what we are funding, and how we are doing that, so that we can align and coordinate our efforts. But then with that, just 3 quick examples, and but look forward to discussing more in the breakout groups. Thank you so much. Program Director, over to you.
You're muted, Sfiso.
I see that I'm muted. I think I got caught up into the excitement of the 3 initiatives that Dr. Inga have shared with us. Thank you so much for that, Dr. Inga. I would like now to invite Mr. Mashinini to just come on the stage as part of the panel discussion. And perhaps maybe as he come on stage, the first one, which will allow him to make his remarks, but perhaps maybe also to just reflect on the 2 presentations that are interlinked from Dr. Inga as well as Dr. Bruce, and then we'll have a Q&A sessions in the short. Mr. Mashinini, are you with us?
Yeah, no, thank you, Sfiso. I'm not gonna take a long time. I'm just gonna high level. I'm joining with my phone because my load shedding has incapacitated my computer. So I'm gonna talk about what SABDF is doing. We are promoting the African trade, and in our pillars, we are looking at food security, we're looking at energy, we're looking at even the endowments. And I like what Inga covered quite a bit because it talks to first our approach. We maximize on endowments. So, and I'll explain exactly what's happening in our program. So we have food security as one of the catalytic verticals on our side, but in order to unlock the capacity and the capability, for example, of a strategic country like Zambia, what we have identified, it's the opportunity that exists with Zambia having 8 borders around it, with more than 600 million people around it. So key to us was to focus our attention on first dealing with the issues of infrastructure that will also align to some of the things that Inga has spoken to. So we are solutioning for that. We've done capital raise for that. But now zooming into the conversation of food security and how we support businesses right across the system, and how we bring value add, how we bring even how people can responsibly manage grant funding and business development in terms of that entire ecosystem. We have raised capital. The capital is targeting energy. And when I say energy, we are looking at even climate action goals, SDGs, and so on. And some of the solutions, without taking too much shine from the solar solutions. So we've partnered with a company in South Africa, for example, that's unlocking a hydrogen economy that we are also bringing into the regional countries. Currently, there is a project that is happening that's underway here in South Africa, which is a partnership of IDC, DBSA, and a company called Mitochondria, who is our partner, that is unlocking hydrogen economy. The project is launching the manufacture of hydrogen fuel cells, which are very green and very desirable in terms of climate action. So we are pushing that project quite aggressively. It's going to launch in South Africa first. And the good part about some of the things that I was alluding to, which also talk to how we look at these technologies. The good part is that for the first time, to the point that was mentioned earlier, research and development has to drive everything. So this technology is coming from R&D that was pushed by South Africans, and which is now at the point of deployment. And as part of that, we have also galvanized support from MDBs to support the rolling out of these technologies, talking to that green element. So SABDF is pushing quite a bit on that. And lastly, agriculture and food security and agro-processing. It's one of our big pillars. We want to make sure that in how we roll it out, we align it to the SDGs, especially the priority SDGs, the ones that are ranked highest. So with that being said, I did not come having prepared a presentation because I was standing in for someone that could not attend, so I didn't have enough time to prepare for this. But a lot of what has been said and the issues of green energy, how we use energy, how we optimize on the endowments. For example, one of the companies we've partnered with, Singamati, has a technology that has been unearthing resources like water resources that we did not previously know they exist. The technology has identified quite a bit of aquifers right across the region, countries like Lesotho, South Africa, Zimbabwe, and we are planning a hydrology study in Zambia because we know that what we see on the surface is just a tip of the iceberg. A lot of our resources are underground. Billions of years have put some of these endowments underground. So unearthing that, and before we optimize and leverage off technology that is being discussed, we have to understand our endowments. And once that is understood, then we can optimize from that in terms of planning, studies, R&Ds that have to happen, and connecting this into food. Water is food. It tells you that when we then deploy these projects at a regional level, and how we then make sure that we also strategically align our efforts in terms of understanding these endowments are right across the region, so that we do it in a way that's coordinated. For us, the important thing is to get Africa to trade and also solve the issues of infrastructure, so that projects like this will also benefit from having solutions for things like infrastructure. So yeah, so that is sort of a brief that I will say, but I can prepare a deck that I can share with the participants here. I just didn't have enough time to prepare.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mashinini. And I think you have given us a very great insight in terms of what the South African Business Development Forum is engaging on, and the specific initiatives that you are driving. From that presentation you've just made, it gives me no doubt that you will be also ready to answer some of the very important questions that the attendants are having. Now that we are heading into the Q&A session, we have about 10 minutes that we can answer. And I think Dr. Inga's engagement as well, and sharing those initiatives in the countries like Zambia, were very inciting. I would like then to allow an opportunity for the different colleagues on the call and partners to ask their question to the three important speakers of ours that have shared their excellent knowledge and practical experience that they are doing on the ground to try and upscale the food systems within the continent. I'm hoping that Kanto, you can assist me with hands if I can see any, but perhaps one that, while we're waiting for the hands to come, one that was directed to Dr. Inga. I think it comes from Albert, from the reading from the comment section. I think it's addressed to Dr. Inga. It says, what are the conditions of selecting a country to upscale some of these initiatives that you have shared with us?
Thanks very much for that question, Albert. Very good question. I think there's a few things. Of course, you know, building on existing initiatives, existing programs does play a role. So where we have already established accelerator or incubator activities, but also we look at the agribusiness ecosystem, where there's either a great need or where there's perhaps a more conducive environment. So it depends on what the accelerator program is the objectives are. It's infinitely more difficult to strengthen an agribusiness ecosystem in a country where there is perhaps, you know, not a strong enabling environment. So that does become a challenge. Zambia at the moment is really on the rise, on the up, and so that also played a role. Yeah, I think for now I will leave it at that. But I mean, there are many other considerations as well. I hope that helps.
Thank you so much for that. Please, just any other question that you might have. I see the sending another question which might be directed to Mr. Mashinini. They are all coming online, I must say, which they are linking with a statement that was made by Dr. Inga, that you gotta be able to complement or augment the technical support with market linkages and some of the funding instruments to assist in the participation, particularly of the small-scale farmers. And they're asking to you, Mr. Mashinini, on the work that you have shared with us specifically, if there are any of those that you can share or areas that you think could be looked at in really uplifting the efforts of market linkages with the different beneficiaries that you are assisting within the Southern region.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So as part of what we are doing on the food security pillar, we have partnered with the Office of the Vice President, who is an owner of a project of resettlement schemes in Zambia that has a land size under its control of almost 1 million hectares. I think it's 943,000 hectares. And there are a lot of smallholder farmers that are in these resettlement schemes. And one of our responsibilities is to coordinate that, support that in terms of both technical skills, in terms of funding for their activities, and also aggregating out of the ecosystem and directing it into our cross-border trade. So that program, I think, to my best knowledge, it was being handed over. And where I see an opportunity is that from the ecosystem, I'm looking at business development support. We are looking at how we fund it. And one of the points that have been said is this issue of working capital. And I will add that when we say working capital, one wants to zoom into the actual financial instruments that are being used to fund and capacitate these small businesses. And we need to talk about how we leverage off technology, how we basically also have a faster turnaround times that is customized to meet their needs. And I fully agree that a lot of funding needs to now be based on data-driven decisions. In other words, you want to fund with an instrument that will unlock working capital challenges, but at the same time, you want to be collecting data against performance of all the beneficiaries that are being funded, so that the decisions that we make into the future start to talk to the data itself, and we make it to be data-driven, because what it does, it makes us to know those that perform better and those that won't perform better. So part of what we are looking at is that, how we fund. But I fully concur with the points that were made around the need being more towards working capital as opposed to long-term funding. With that being said, over and above that is to look at issues of efficiency into their own operations. So this program is called ARISE program, and we will be looking at energy consumptions from all solutions, solar and all that. So support for us, we have raised funds, but obviously partnerships are key. But is to support then that program, because we do believe that if we look at the endowments in a country like Zambia, but even in South Africa, there are areas of interest. We know that well supported, well planned and strategy deployed properly, we believe that that is a food basket of the region. So yeah, there's many opportunities in terms of support, both from funding, co-funding, as well as, for me, the key thing is how we support these. Funding becomes, a lot of discussions is around funding. But for us, we think that the support drives funding, because funding becomes just something that unlocks value creation. So yeah, so that we can collaborate on issues like that. And also the program itself is huge and it requires an ecosystem. Even the capital flows needs an ecosystem. So it's opportunities for partnerships.
Thank you so much for that, Mr. Mashinini. I will then be asking Ms. Kanyani to just get ready for the next session where she's sharing some initiative. But I think the last one which I'm receiving here, it's not addressed into the specific expert, but I believe it's maybe a last minute, it provides an opportunity as a last word from Dr. Inga as well as Mr. Mashinini on how should the private sector step up climate action as your departing point.
Yeah, I think in terms of climate action, we to step it up, I think first for us is to use the window that we have currently, because there's a lot of capital flows as well as instruments that have been committed by the multilaterals. For example, one of our raise was a green bond. So we believe that first is to galvanize that side of things in terms of aligning to the capital flows that are ready to be deployed and the instruments that we should be targeting, because I think the region saves South Africa, but the region has not really utilized the opportunities of the instruments that are available. So we've raised quite a substantial instrument from Luxembourg. And I think that as an ecosystem, we're going to have to optimize on that, because there are quite a bit of capital flows and instruments that are targeting an environment and climate issues. With that being said, some of the things that we are seeing that makes us not to optimize on capital flows that are available in the instruments is that we have not organized the ecosystem to have the right level of advisory that understand these instruments, that can align to the principles of these investments and reporting and also measuring pre-deployment and post-deployment, because the investors that are investing in these, including social impact bonds, all these instruments, we can optimize on them. With that being said, again, it talks to business support, because these instruments, in order for us to draw down against commitment, they're going to need us to have a very strong ecosystem, again, of business support, of those who are monitoring and those that are doing value creation, and position this all the way from early, so from seed investment, from Series A, Series B, and upwards. And we have to align all of that value chain and aggregate the strategy in such a way that we are able to even progress companies over time. The work itself, I think it's going to be long-term work, because we're dealing with early businesses, seed businesses, and some will be more advanced, some will be very mature, and others for scale. And you have to integrate the whole ecosystem. But one of the challenges, you have to integrate the region to be self-sufficient. So I think at high level, I would say that these are the things that are facing all of us as an ecosystem. But I think that if we can align those things, then that helps. And then obviously governments will come as partners.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nshinende, for that very insightful. Dr. Inga, your departing shots. You are muted.
Sorry. Sifiso, you know, I smiled when you asked the question, because normally when, as a researcher, I think about, well, you know, how does research need to transform to address climate action? And you asked a different question. You're asking how, you know, what is the role of the private sector in this? I think just also building on the previous inputs, understanding the risk appetite for different investors is something that I see quite as a a big stumbling block at times for agribusinesses. Within a commercial banking sector alone in one country, you will have so many different approaches, different risk appetites, and that shapes who is eligible for funding, for loans, etc. So for businesses, small businesses, knowing who would be prepared to support your efforts is something quite key. And sometimes I've also noticed that is not sketched out, mapped in all the countries in the region. So maybe if there's a research on the call, that's something that is a good exercise to do, to map out the risk appetites for funders, investors in a particular country. And I think linked to that, there's also a role of the public sector, government, in ensuring that there's a throughput, because in several countries in the region, there's oftentimes a focus on medium enterprises, those who can demonstrate scale, those that can commercialize. And so, or on the other hand, there's a focus on the very new startup, but there's that gap in the middle, where I think more support is needed. And so making sure that there are funding opportunities across the spectrum and pipeline is important. And then coming back to the role of the private sector in promoting climate action, I think another role is, at the end of the day, businesses are out to make a profit and make money, but they do have a role to play in capacity strengthening, making sure that, that there is a strong cohort of young entrepreneurs that can work and come into their businesses. So I often say that along with accelerators, you need to also look at very strong private sector facing internships or placement programs that put students with that entrepreneurial drive into agribusinesses and work there for a while, and have businesses support that efforts. So I will just leave it at that, Sifiso. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that, Doc. And thank you so much to all, also the insight that came from Mr. Mashinini, as well as the opening remarks from Dr. Bruce. We are now shifting our gears and now getting into some of the initiatives that are driven by the FANRPAN on climate-smart agriculture. And I would like to invite Ms. Shiluva on the stage. I will also continue to encourage all the participants in the dialogue to continue stating your remarks or your comments, or sharing some of the views and solutions in our chat box, as we'll be collecting all those and forming part of the report from this dialogue on the day one. Ms. Shiluva, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sifiso Ntombela. My name is Shiluva Nkanyani. I work for FANRPAN as a project officer. I'm going to walk you through the projects that we are working on under the CSA thrust here at FANRPAN. If you may allow me to share my screen. The first initiative that I'm going to be sharing about is the TISA project. The TISA project is funded by the Australian government. In this project, we are focusing on transforming smallholder irrigation systems into profitable and self-sustaining systems in Southern Africa. In this initiative, we intend to transform irrigation systems using two entry points, which is soil moisture and nutrition monitoring tools. In this project, we are working in Mozambique, Tanzania, and Zimbabwe. We are working with different partners, including the Australian National University, the CSIRO, and the University of Australia. The second project that I'm going to be speaking to is the Climber project. In this project, we intend to build resilience of production system and transform the climate adaptation capacity of food, land, and water system in the low and income middle countries. In this one, we are working with partners from the University of Leeds, IFPRI, and others. This project it's in Kenya, Senegal, Zambia, in the Philippines, and others. The third one is one of the initiatives that is led by the CGIAR. I'm sure you have heard most of the information on Ukama Usawi that was mentioned by Dr. Inga. We are working in 12 Southeast and Southern countries, including Zambia, Tanzania, Kenya, Malawi, and others. In this initiative, we are working with IMWI, ILRI, and others, including the WellFish. We also have a project that is working on building and exploring the relationship between climate change and other ecosystems. This one is led, we are working with University of Pretoria at the Future Africa. It is supported by the French Embassy and a French agency together with the Belinda and Melinda Gates Foundation. I'm not sure, I think I skipped one of the projects that we are working under. It's we are working on the regional support to national livestock of greenhouse emission inventories. In this one, we are working with the New Zealand Agriculture Greenhouse Gas Research Center, and this one is funded by the New Zealand Ministry. So these are some of the partners that we are working with under the CSA component. That's all. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Shilova, for that. I would like to then invite back Thembi to just outline to us how the breakaway session will go in our next segment, which is now focusing on accelerating climate resilience. We have 3 sessions, but Thembi will come and explain how we're going to be allocated into different rooms and when do we expect it to come back and be reporting back. Can I then invite Thembi to come back on this program?
Thank you, Sfiso, and thank you to the presenters that have really taken us through what building climate resilience is all about. In the next segment, we are now going to be breaking into 3 segments. The first one is going to be focusing on gender and youth issues in as far as accelerating climate resilience is concerned. This session is going to be led by Mr. Oluwatosini from the UNGO, the UN Youth Constituency, and Miss Aya Moner from IS in Morocco. So the second breakout group is going to be focusing on financing climate action in Africa, and this one is going to be led by Mr. Mukasiri Sibanda. And the third group is going to be focusing on adaptation and resilience, and it's going to be led by Ms. Edith Tibawa from COMESA. Each of the group discussions are going to begin with a scene-setting presentation, and then after there are 2 questions that have been prepared that we are going to request that the groups focus on. Our tech team is on standby to start allocating people groups. Kanto, maybe you can advise us on how that is going to happen. But we really would like the starter presentation to take about 10 minutes and the following discussion to take about 20 minutes. So we have about 30 minutes or so in the groups, and we are hoping that we can then all come back into the plenary to provide feedback. We kindly request that within the group, the session leaders, if they can be so kind as to identify someone who's going to provide feedback when we come back, or if they are comfortable with doing the feedback themselves, would appreciate that. But please, let's take about 30 minutes for the discussions and the presentations. Thank you. Kanto, on group allocations.
Okay, thank you, Thembi. So If you are not being invited, please remain on the group, remain on the plenary. We have our French and Portuguese speaker as well. If you are on French and Portuguese language, please remain on the plenary. And everyone, if you are not invited to the group, please remain. And those who are invited, please join the group now. So I'm going to assign everyone. Thank you. Please join. All right, so climate and financing will be, the financing will remain on the main group. The financing climate action in Africa will remain on the main group. Mr. Mukasiri?
Yes, are we ready to start?
Yes, you can start now the climate and the financing climate action. Yes.
All right, thanks a lot. And it's a huge privilege to be part of this important conversation. So when we talk about climate financing, I think it's important that we realize that the financing side normally is a tour, it follows after we have discussed in terms of the investment priorities. So I'm sure we are very clear in terms of the discussions that have taken place so far in the morning in terms of what are the pressure points that climate change or climate crisis have caused, and why we need to mobilize financing to address or to invest in some of the pressure points or the projects that have been highlighted. But to start with, I think let's appreciate that Africa's role is very negligible when it comes to being responsible for this crisis. In terms of percentage of contribution to the greenhouse gas emissions, you are looking at 4 or less than 4%. So there is what is called the polluter pays principle. So in terms of climate change financing, let us not just talk about it from aid, but being clear that reparations have to be paid. This is a matter of justice. Economies that gained wealth by disregarding costs to the people, planet, must be held accountable. So I think that's one of the most important things to bear in mind, that let us also galvanize our demands as Africa to say this is a matter of reparations. And a bit of historical background to this matter is also quite important. When slavery was abolished, it is the slave owners, not the slaves, who got compensated. After colonialism gaining independence, there was no any talk of how do we make sure that we restore the socio-economic means of production that they've been taken over through imperialism and colonialism. So right now we are struggling as Africans to assert our land rights. I think that's very important, that for now, with this climate emergency that we are confronted with, we are very clear in terms of the role of reparations. The second point that I want to bring to this conversation is about the role of the public financial management system as a source of finance for climate action. And it's very important that we also delineate into that focus is one on decarbonization, which means that the economy make it less emitting or reducing totally to zero the emissions of greenhouse gases through technologies that are cleaner, on paper said to be cleaner, because if you look directly the footprint in terms of some of the clean energy minerals, they are also a risk on themselves. But also you look at other natural solutions that are also important, such as reforestation and preserving the current lungs of the globe, such as the Amazon and the Congo Basin. So you are looking at the role of public financial management systems. How can government be able to mobilize resources to finance climate adaptation and mitigation? It is important to note that in terms of Africa, we have the high-level panel report on illicit financial flows that was on illicit financial flows from Africa that was endorsed by the African Union in 2015. That report underscored three important issues. One, that Africa was losing more than 50 billion annually then to illicit financial flows. And if you fast forward now to the latest data from UN's Conference on Trade and Development, as a report tackling illicit financial flows for sustainable development in Africa, it shows that the continent is losing now about 88.6 billion annually through illicit financial flows. So the doubling factor, the growth of illicit financial flows is very clear. And the chief culprits when it comes to illicit financial flows, far from the popular belief, it's not public sector corruption. We're talking about multinational cooperation, the broken global financial ecosystem that makes it easier for tax evasion and tax avoidance, the shifting of profits in the jurisdictions where wealth is generated. So if we could curb illicit financial flows from Africa, for instance, if you compare the 88.6 billion figure vis-a-vis the 100 billion pledge that was made by donors through the Paris Agreement, which they are failing to fulfill, you find that Africa could have a good starting point in terms of the ability to respond to some of the challenges or vulnerabilities that are induced by climate change. So it's important again to quickly talk about the four roles of taxation so that we get a snapshot or understanding of the role of climate financing linked with public resource management. And I give the four roles of taxation. The first one is revenue. Government must raise sufficient revenue. And part of that is being under threat because of, number one, the illicit financial flows, and in particular also the overly generous tax incentives that are given for foreign direct investment, which are unnecessary. And if these are kept, you can see that government can show up its resources to respond better. But obviously, when raising revenue, it should be progressive, meaning to say that those that earn more should pay more, and vice versa. Those that earn less should pay less, a proportionate share of their income to taxes. But if we look at the current situation right now, we have companies in the energy sector, your gas, oil, coal, they've made super profits, windfall revenue as a result of the spike in energy costs, partly because of the Russian-Ukrainian war and other factors of demand and supply. But where are the instruments that are in place to ensure that these windfall profits are also contributing to government's taxable capacity and revenue that is needed to finance climate adaptation and mitigation? So this is one key area to focus on. The second role of taxation is redistribution. What do we mean here? It is behind the principle of maximizing public value. Just because people contribute taxes, corporates contribute taxes, but the goods that come as a result and services that are offered by government are for everyone's benefit. This is where redistribution comes. And in light of that, when we look at the budget, national budgets, are we very clear seeing that those that are vulnerable, the poor and marginalized groups in society, worst affected by climate change, how are we deploying those resources to ensure that we offer social protection? The third aspect of it is repricing. Repricing is very, very important in the sense that it is a tool that is used by government to discourage or promote consumption of certain goods and services. So if we look at those that are causing the current challenges that we are having or perpetuating them, are we having robust taxing mechanisms to punish them for the challenges that they are causing? And it's ridiculous right now if you look at the amounts of super profits that the 5 big oil companies are generating and the missed priorities in terms of how they're investing those resources, like buying back your shares in the form of, as the case of Shell, and very little being invested in terms of energy transitioning, which is quite important to take note of. But also let's look at how the current revenues that have been generated, your carbon tax, have been deployed again to achieve some of the challenges that we are talking about here, which brings me to the last role of taxation, which is called representation, about the social contract, the general challenges when we talk about lack of public confidence, trust in how public resources are being handled to maximize public value. So we talk about high levels of corruption, lack of transparency, fruitless and wasteful expenditures. These are some of the general things, that are inefficiencies. If you look at the reports from the Auditor General, that needs to be addressed to make sure that we amplify or maximize the value that comes. And it is important to note that most of the things that we look at when we are talking about public financial management, provision of basic services, social protection, and so forth, are also interlinked or intertwined with addressing or mitigating some of the impacts of climate change. Then I shift now gears to the next point after the public financial management, which talks about aid, which I will not dwell much on it because aid, I'll dwell much because I have to speak much also about the philanthropic side of issues. But at the first point, I want to refer to my first point about reparations. It's not just aid, it's about making sure that there is justice. Africa is compensated for some of the harm that we are seeing. But if you look at it from a philanthropic position, what we need is expanded contribution from philanthropic actors. So just to give an example from the McKinsey study in 2020, which highlighted that altogether US philanthropists contributed 64 billion, and of which 320 million went directly towards climate change, and 1.4 billion to environmental related issues such as air, land, and water conservation. So you can see that we need to scale up. Philanthropy must scale up its support to climate change, cognizant of the fact that the issues that philanthropists fight for are the issues that are being taken back because of the hazards and challenges that we are facing because of climate change. And it is important that the role of philanthropy when it comes to financing be focused on 3 key areas. Just to wind up this conversation. One, we are talking about the policy and enabling policy space that tackles the challenges of climate financing. And this is critical to be able to look at some of the African countries and their national determined contributions, the specific plans, so that they are clearly articulated and realistically look at how resources can be mobilized to support their achievement. So this is very important. The second bit of it looks at climate solutions, the technologies that we speak of. The private sector by nature is risk averse. So to invest in some of these startups that may not be clear in terms of what will be the outcomes immediately in terms of generating your profit or stable revenue, some of the challenges that will be faced, then that bridging, that de-risking such nature or such investments is where philanthropy can also come in to support. And then lastly, we are looking at issues in terms of the impact of on people. Your food security, your disruption in terms of at the displacement of people and so forth. So from that mitigation point, it is very important that we recalculate or recalibrate how philanthropy is also deliberately supporting in those areas because they are linked. Then the last area is to focus on the role of the private sector, which is also quite critical to look at in terms of the support that is coming in and debt factor component. Africa is already drowning or strangled by debt, and it's unfortunate that part of the finance that is flowing for climate financing is worsening the debt situation that is already causing fiscal stress on the continent. But the private sector, of course, they've got a key role to play. But if you look at the numbers at times, for instance, you look at those that are responsible for the are involved in the energy sector, they are getting more windfall profits, which dwarf the amount that philanthropy is contributing or to finance climate change. So it is important also to see that the global financial ecosystem as it is something that we should also be preoccupied with, because firstly, it is not equitable, it is not sustainable, by making sure that it makes Africa finance the developed countries. If you look at the data from the high-level panel report, it shows that Africa is a net creditor to the rest of the world, because what flows to the continent via foreign or via official development assistance and foreign direct investments is dwarfed by what the continent loses through illicit financial flows. So this brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you. Over to you, facilitator.
Mr. Mukasir, I think you are the facilitator.
Oh, sorry, I'm the facilitator. Okay, thank you very much. So this is now the question and answer session, comments, anything that you would need also to contribute in terms of climate financing. Feel free to raise your hands or make use of the chat box to contribute.
Chairperson.
Yes, Mr. Bonani.
Oh, thank you very much. I think I'm going to say a couple of things, but the basis of my argument on any of these things that will take us as the continent forward is that we need to take our destiny into our hands. Dwelling much on the history will not change the present, neither will that change the future. Perhaps it should be used as the basis. My first argument is that it is a responsibility of our governments to determine their tax regimes. It's not outside us, and depending on the source of the tax revenue, someone may be influenced by some of the funders of their programs. But my belief is that in terms of public finance, it is the responsibility of the local authorities, and I mean the governments on the continent. Secondly, I align with the argument of identifying the problem with the financial setup or system. But in terms of playing a watchdog, we should be having institutions that are supposed to be working for our governments to reduce this problem we are having of illicit transfers or movement of funds in a wrong way. But my argument is that let's be more inward looking, finding solutions of strengthening or establishing institutions in instances where we do not have, either than waiting for the Western world to come and assist us. Otherwise, we will wait forever. Let me end there. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Can I take some more couple of comments, questions, and before I respond?
Mr. Mukasiri, just to let you know as well that we have Portuguese and French speakers. So when they speak French or Portuguese, you might turn out the translation when they speak.
All right, thanks for that important tip. Colleagues, or let me perhaps quickly respond to the issues that have been raised here. Starting with the issue of taxation. We are living in a global village. That's the reality. So much as we want to look at the domestic initiatives, which are quite important, but they are not sufficient because we are dealing with multinational corporations, and multinational corporations that they make use of multiple companies in multiple jurisdictions to provide finance, to provide some certain goods and services. So they do what is called financial engineering, make numbers work for them to evade and avoid paying taxes in jurisdictions where they are producing, where they are earning their significant wealth from. And this is enabled by the financial secrecy and the tax havens, for instance, your Ireland, your USA, your Britain, your Switzerland, and so forth. So this is an issue that should be taken to the UN. If you look at the third conference on financing for development, part of the issues on the agenda that the developed countries forced developing countries to drop was the issue of a UN tax convention. So the inequitable and unsustainable global financial ecosystem need to be addressed. Even if you look at the element of environmental cost, how they are not reflected in the profit statements of most multinational corporations. It is that scenario because how the financial architecture is framed as it is right now is not responsive at all to the climate crisis that we are facing. This is why you can see your Shell, Total, and so forth generate these billions from polluting this environment and passing on the costs to people. So I think that's very important to focus on. Yes, let's look at domestic level. What is it that we can do? Like, for instance, making sure that overly generous tax incentives that erode government's fiscal capabilities also, or with a hidden cost and a subsidy to the rich and multinational corporations be kept. It's another key area also to look at what our governments can also do. The issue of reparations and polluter pays principle, it is at the center of justice. As Africans, let's not be ashamed. It will take us time, perhaps, for them to start to respond and see the light. But in the mix of the conversation, let us not be shy as Africa to say things as they are. We have been turning the other cheek, and that's what we are told to do. But when you talk about the Jews, they talk about the reparations, about the damage, about the Holocaust. If you talk about it, if you talk about the in Namibia, if you talk about it in terms of Kenya, right now they are suing the government of UK. The war in Congo, you have Uganda being forced to pay reparations to DRC. But when it comes to us and the West, we somehow think this is not about justice. This is about justice. Climate change is about justice. It's about human rights. So in my view, let us not be shy to be able to point that out. Any comments, any questions or contributions?
I would like to respond.
Yes, Sasha. Go ahead.
I would like to respond on asking for reparations or asking for what we think belongs to us. But at the same time, there is also a lot of corruption that happens within African government. Because while we are fighting for reparations or financing of climate change programs through reparations or through whatever belongs to us, we also need to fix our houses. Because in my case, if somebody has to ask a European government to give money to Malawi and they have to ask for my opinion, I would say no, because I see how money is spent by politicians in that country. So while those issues are real, we need to fix our own houses first before we can start asking, because even if that money comes, it will not trickle down to the people that need it. If you look at smaller countries in Africa, you find that most of the climate change programs are financed by donor money. If you look, the extent to which government finance projects in those countries is very small, is not even significant. So those are some of the issues that we need to look at when we are talking about reparations, when we are talking about people financing us. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. Sorry if I did not pronounce your name well, Nyoni.
No, it's Njongenhle Nyoni. Thanks for your presentation. I think for me, from a capacity perspective, because I think you touch, the subject is very important and it's very relevant to what we need to focus on, because we need the investments for us to build that adaptive capacity of our communities of the African continent. And there's a lot of understanding that is required. The technical capacity of our people to understand climate financing, because I think one of the challenges that we've had is accessing some of the funds that have been availed, because they are so stringent. Maybe the requirements are so stringent in terms of how to access the money that is available. When you talk about the GEF, sometimes there are very few institutions or member states that have access to that amount of money that is available. There you talk about that shortfall that is there, what was pledged, committed, but we don't seem to be having access to those funds. I think there's that part of capacity strengthening that is required. I'm not sure from your space what your perspectives are around the capacity issues, what can be done, what is urgent in terms of making sure that we, even if it's not deep financial literacy, but there's some level of financing that we understand, such that we push with one voice in terms of trying to access the funds or the investments required. Rachel talks about, the funds trickling in, and most people will not even understand. They will think that it's a favor when they are receiving support in terms of adaptation. But how do we ensure that we build the capacity of the different stakeholders, non-state, but also the state actors in terms of understanding climate finance? Thanks.
All right, thanks a lot, Nyoni. Yeah, I think as I was supposed to share with you two key questions that should guide this conversation, and I'm happy that most of the contributions that we've had so far reflect on those two questions. The first one is, how can Africa improve mobilization of climate finance for sustainable development and resilient interventions? The second one is, what are the barriers, channels for accessing finance and technical support tailored specifically for Africa in mitigation and adaptation initiatives? So these are things I think that we are sort of like grappling with, and we're supposed to respond for during this conversation and the feedback that we're supposed to give to the main session. So starting with the issue of corruption, like I said when I was explaining the 4 roles of taxation, the last one that speaks to representation, about the social contract, the challenges that we are facing of fruitless and wasteful expenditure, the issue of corruption, theft of public resources. No, it must be addressed, because it is important that if we are looking at the efficiency of making sure that the little that we have, we use it effectively, so that the more that comes, it can bring marginal benefits again, is very important. How do we maximize public value from these resources is quite important. And I think tackling corruption is very key. But what I did was just to show you that in terms of the resource leakage, the biggest culprits are multinational corporations, contributing 65% the bulk of the losses from the continent, according to the high-level panel report on illicit financial flows that was endorsed by the African Union in 2015. Criminality accounts for 30%, and corruption accounts for 5%. You see recently the likes of Glencore, how they've paid, for instance, 1.1 billion fine to USA for most of the corruption and misdeeds that they've done in Africa. So it's important also, much as we want to focus on our governments, but also understand the diabolic role or the aggressive accounting that is done by multinational corporations to make their numbers work. So it's very fundamental that we focus on corruption, but let us not lose also the bigger picture in terms of what will transform the game on financing for development, as what studies are showing. Nyoni, I think you raised critical questions there. And there's the Stop the Bleeding campaign. What we are trying to do is to basically what the Stop the Bleeding campaign is all about is about the mobilization of resources to finance development on the continent, but fighting all forms of injustice, from tax injustice, debt injustice, trade and investment injustice. So it's about taking the conversation in spaces where fiscal justice issues, the numbers, the money, public money, and any other investments are rarely understood. And this is why it's important to take the conversations to the people looking at different movements. For instance, when you talk about labor, they must be able to understand climate financing and how it can, its impact in terms of one, unfair working conditions and wage evasion, and also the risk of redundancy and the risk of redundant money that is needed for reskilling and all those things. I think labor, if you look at the nature of climate financing, is about making sure that we are inclusive and everyone that is affected is also part of the conversation. Sfiso, let me open this conversation. You can go ahead.
Thank you so much, Mr. Facilitator. Mine is just a reminder that we have to go back into the main plenary session. And if you could maybe have someone who would make that feedback into the plenary session appointed and start preparing for it. Thank you so much, Mr. Span.
Thanks, Sfiso, for that reminder. Do we have any volunteer to give feedback? Okay, if not, I will deliver the feedback. Thank you, colleagues. In the meantime, can we take advantage if there are any comments, questions that we should we have? Let's take advantage of this time to wrap up, to address any pending contributions. Silence. Can I just speak anyone just to motivate, to ensure that at least we are reflecting more in terms of this opportunity that we have on climate financing. Brian, do you want to give it a go? Just share your thoughts and reflection to this conversation.
Are you asking Brian Makele?
Yeah. Oh, Veronica, I'm just trying to randomly pick people so that at least we can have diversity in terms of our contributions to this session.
Okay, I would want to intervene. So thank you very much. My name is Sylvester. I'm with the FANRPAN team. So I am trying to juxtapose the claim of sense of entitlement on climate financing to development aid implementation in Africa.
Sorry, if you could increase your volume a bit, you are very faint.
Okay, is it better now?
Yeah. Yes.
I'm trying to juxtapose the conversation of sense of entitlement on climate financing to the implementation of development aid in Africa. There's a school of thought, there's a book by one economist that she tries to argue that any form of aid that comes through to Africa is not well implemented because our leaders tend to embezzle the funding and they are not able to use it for its appropriate
Not
goes
sure.
ahead to argue.
Yes, go
Hello,
ahead.
is it better now?
Yes, it's better
in
now.
her
I
book,
lost you
she goes
temporarily.
ahead, in her book, she goes ahead to argue that we should have internally generated funding by Africans itself in implementing some of these strategies rather than falling on donor aid and international funding. So in as much as we would want our developed economies who are polluting the environment the most to bring in funding to mitigate climate change impact, it would also be good that Africans are able to generate funding internally to also be able to tackle the climate change menace. Thank you.
Thanks, Sylvester. I think that's a very valid point. This is why we are talking about the role of public financial management, the role of taxation, the four roles of taxation. If you look again at the issue of representation, the social contract, it strengthens when citizens are more holding government to account because they are paying taxes. If money comes from any other way, sources which is not taxation, then the accountability systems are weakened. But also to understand that there's a relationship that also comes from some of the aid that we look at in foreign direct investment, especially foreign direct investment, when we connect it with the illicit financial flows on the continent. So it is the one that weakens the capacity of a strong, the capacity of having or the environment of having a strong social contract between those that govern and those that contribute taxes to government. So it's very important also to understand that we cannot look at these issues in silos. There is a reason why multinational corporations that are behind the colonization of Africa, that are behind slavery, also have shifted their ways to make sure that it's a financial mass of transactions that they use it to siphon resources on the continent. So I think that's the bigger picture that we should also not lose, in my view.
So Musakir, I think I have a comment also on the chat. What can be done to make sure the multinational companies fully participate in climate financing as a way of giving back to the community?
Yeah, there are a number of issues that are quite important there to look at. And these are not silver bullets. I think this has been said. But number one is about the political will. The challenges that are being faced from a technical lens, the solutions are very clear. But what is lacking is the political will. For instance, right now, the reform of the global tax rules is being led by the exclusive club of the rich of the OECD instead of the UN tax convention taking leadership on that matter, where all countries have an equal say and can participate equitably in terms of decision making. So the first thing I think is very important that let's have global reforms that look at equitable and sustainable allocation of taxing rights, making sure that in jurisdictions where wealth is generated, for instance, resource-rich African countries, a fair share of tax revenue is contributed. Then secondly, let's look at the environmental impact assessments. Some of the challenges that we are grappling with in terms of the drivers of or the causes of climate change, it is these multinational corporations that are behind. So let's just make sure that as we talk about environmental impact assessment, the cost of obligation when it comes to the environment is properly accounted for, and rather than the current scenario where the environmental and social cost of extraction, particularly in the extractive sector, are passed on to the community. The third one is you need a robust public financial management framework that also very clear in terms of making sure that the value is maximized, in terms of public value is maximized. Those that the resources are deployed for the benefit of societies that are or marginalized people in marginalized area. And I think that is the basic foundation of any functional public financial management system, redistribution of roles in a very progressive manner to fight poverty and inequality.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mu. I don't want to pronounce this wrongly.
Mukasiris Banda.
I think we are now 15 seconds to the end of the session, and I think everyone will automatically now come back to the session. Thank you so much for this informative session. Thank you, everyone. So everyone will now join the group back. Thank you.
All right.
All right. I hope all the colleagues are back from the breakaway session. I see the numbers are tilting back to about 980. If our colleagues from the IT side, you can assist us to ensure every colleague have been assisted back into the main plenary before we proceed with the program.
Yes, Dr. Sifiso, everyone is back.
Thank you so much for that. And thank you to our breakaway facilitators. I had an opportunity to attend all of them. I think that was very insightful and very energetic discussion that we've had, and creative ideas that one has also listened to. I don't know if Tembi is with us. There is a poll that we must put it up before we allow different rapporteurs to report back on the three breakaway sessions. If we could start with the poll where the different attendees have a opportunity to just answer a few critical questions. Will you assist us with that?
Yes, Kanto is the one who's standing by on the poll.
Okay. Thank you so much.
All right, so I'm going to launch some poll. So please respond. I'm going to give you few seconds to answer them. So question number 1, do you think climate change is a global emergency? So just respond by yes or no. Some few seconds. Okay. Oh, I think you had 100% responding that it's, oh, we have 3% responding. I'm going to end the poll soon. "42 of the 74 answered. We're still waiting for some. All right.
Are we proceeding to the next question, Kanto? Or are you still waiting for more responding?
I think maybe we lost Kanto. I know that she's experiencing load shedding. Perhaps we could just move on to the feedback, and I don't know if Sylvester does have the poll or it was sitting with Kanto.
Let's move on to feedback.
All right. Thank you so much for that, Mr. Hele and Les Tembi. Can I then invite the facilitator from the breakout session that discussed gender and youth and the rapporteur to just give us their feedback?
O geral,
keep it short, please.
Mantenha-se curto.
Thank you so much, Tombela, Dr. Tombela, for giving us the floor. At the Gender and Youth breakout room, we're able to discuss a few questions. We talked around the challenges youth face in promotion of innovative solutions to fight climate change. And we also talked about youth-led initiatives in climate change that addresses and enhances inclusive participation in decision-making. Likewise, we also focused on how Africa can turn climate challenges into green job opportunities for youth and women. So from all of this discussion, we were able to highlight a few things, which are the challenges ranging from challenges of farmers, the challenges farmers have at the moment, which is ranging from deforestation to pests and diseases and drought. So after looking at some of those challenges, we also focused on the effect of those challenges, its impact on the livelihood and also on productivity at the farm end. But some of the problems that were raised, lack of commitment from government, especially in terms of support and in terms of implementation. And we looked at platforms where everyone can bring in their thoughts in terms of discussion so that all voices can be captured, especially within policy and also at the grassroots level in association and engagement. And we also look at lack of resources. Resources are quite diverse. Yes, we know natural resources are in abundance and human resources are also there, but then we are limited resources in terms of technological and ecological solutions, which we have been clamoring for. And we also look at some of the consequent challenges on inclusivity inclusivity of youth, indigenous people, gender, marginalized persons, and a number of other issues, so that it can be a cross-cutting and everyone can have their voices captured, because we understand that all hands must be on deck for us to be able to have a change on our agri-food systems. Then we also suggested ways in which looking forward on possible solutions that we can bring in terms of policy, research, and capacity building to change the current narrative that we have. And we've been able to mainstream youth engagement, youth participation, and gender equality as a way forward, in which we have to, most of our projects, initiative programs should be around ecological solutions that have people-centered and location-specific for it to be resilient if we want to have a shot at agri-food system transformation in Africa. Thank you so much.
Thank you so very much for that. May I then proceed into the next feedback session, the next facilitator dealing with the financing climate action in Africa?
Yeah, thank you. We had a robust discussion and conversation, but on issues that revolved on number one, in terms of looking at the polluter pays principle. That is something that we must look at as Africa, not just aid, but from a justice perspective. Of course, there is that view that it's not going to be easy and it will take time and it's not guaranteed. But at the same time, in the interest of justice, those that generate wealth from polluting or disregarding environmental and or the cost on the planet and people should be held accountable. So it's very important. The second part of it is also looking at the public financial management system, enhancing public resources, mobilization of public resources to deliver public value in terms of the challenges that we are facing because of the climate crisis. And the key issue there, part of it is that the illicit financial flows that are undermining Africa's capacity to mobilize its own resources. Like, for instance, the UN Conference on Trade and Development, in its report of economic development in Africa 2020, highlighted that the continent was losing more than 88.6 billion annually through illicit financial flows that flows mostly to developed countries. And if you look at that figure, it's almost equal to the amount that was pledged by developed countries to support developing countries via the Paris Agreement. So curbing illicit financial flows is very critical, and this will not happen if the inequitable and unsustainable global financial ecosystem is not reformed. Then this third issue also that we discussed is the issue of philanthropy, the role of philanthropy. That if we look at the numbers, it shows that very little is being invested towards climate change, and there's a need for philanthropy to come in terms of support around 3 areas. One, the enabling policy, environment, or space for effective mobilization of financing for climate crisis, to respond to the climate crisis. The second one is to come up with to de-risk some of the projects that are required to offer technological solutions to the current crisis that we are facing. The third one also being more deliberate and intentional in terms of cushioning people against the impacts like your involuntary displacements, malnutrition, and hunger, and so forth. So it's very important for philanthropy to upscale support towards climate mitigation and adaptation. If you look at, for instance, as an example, US in 2020, the philanthropists contributed 64 billion in total, and the 320 million only went directly towards climate change. So it shows the gap that still exists compared to 10.5 billion that was channeled in the education sector. There's need, of course, to continuously engage to understand some of the conditionalities that makes it hard for Africa to still access finance for climate change, but most of them lies with the broken or inequitable global financial ecosystem that is not primed as we speak right now. If you look at the companies in the energy sector, your Total, Shell, and so forth, they're generating billions and billions of profits right now from the high energy costs. But at the same time, they are the one that is responsible for the current challenges that we are facing. So there is a mismatch in terms of how the global financial ecosystem is designed, and it is not sensitive to climate change. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that feedback. If we can proceed to the last breakaway session that was dealing with adaptation and resilience. The facilitator is more than welcome, Mrs. Edith, to take us through.
Thank you very much, Chair, and our apologies. We were not able to go to the depths of the questions, but we had a very good presentation on the COMESA Regional Resilience Framework, and a lot of input and reaction was received. The presentation focused on the pillars of the resilience framework, on the coverage, on the implementation approach, on how it is going to benefit the member states. We also had a discussion about how we need to be providing feedback about the previous dialogues that we've had. We've had 22 to date, as we were told, and the discussion focused on the future outcomes of these dialogues and resolution statements and how they can be feeding into policy level decisions and to feedback into national level, whatever. And especially the evidence, that how do we take the evidence forward with real policymakers. So our apologies, we're not able to get into the questions, but I can also ask Tembi and Luembe, who are who are helping me with rapporteuring, if they have any addition to this very brief presentation. Tembi, to you first, do you have any addition to that?
No, I think you have covered it well. I think for us really receiving that presentation on the COMESA Regional Resilience Framework and the different pillars was the main focus. Thanks. I see Luembe's hand is up.
Luembe,
yes,
please.
Yeah, just to add on what you've mentioned, colleagues, after the presentation of the COMESA Resilience Framework, a lot of feedback was received. And some of the issues that came out is that we need to align the COMESA Resilience Framework with the member state priorities to ensure coherence. One of the issues also that came out is the need for partnerships and collaboration, which is key to achieve resilience. And when we talk of partnerships and collaboration, there was emphasis on the need to bring on board the academia, the research institutions, but also many other development partners. The tracking of progress of the dialogues has already been mentioned. There was a mention on research, and also the need for synergy was mentioned between the RECs to avoid duplication of effort. And a quick feedback was given that the development of the resilience framework was informed by the process of involving not only the member states, but also development partners, as well as the RECs and the African Union Commission as well, to avoid that duplication. The issue of financing also came out in the presentation. Member states cannot only depend on international financing to build resilience, but they also need to focus on innovative domestic resource mobilization for them to achieve resilience at national level. And then in terms of synergy, it was mentioned that whatever the RECs are doing should feed into the overall objective of the African Union Commission, who is the leader on resilience, as well as climate change adaptation and mitigation on the continental level. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mr. Mwale, and over to you, Chair, and apologies again.
Thank you so much, Eric, and thank you so much for those additional comments from Mwale. I think all three sessions had very insightful engagement. You can see it was at different level of the depth and as well as trying to locate all those, or trying to collect all that insight, which we'll certainly do and combine it as part of the report at the end of the day. Ladies and gentlemen, I do know some of those colleagues of ours that are joining in from the tip of the continent. Some might be struggling with internet connection at this point in time, but we're hoping that we can still proceed and see if we can complete the session of today with all still in attendance. I am also one of those that now are being affected, but I've made up some backup. I might struggle with the signal. Please do let me know if my signal is starting to be a challenge. Tembi, I don't know, maybe if I can give an opportunity to Kanto or Jongelin, if we can still do the poll, or should we go straight into our last segment of today's program?
I think let's go straight into the last segment of the program. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now heading towards the end of our session, and our last segment touches now into the roadmap that we want to see, heading up into the COP27, what is at stake for Africa. We, as always been the case throughout the day, we have invited one of our brilliant speakers and very much informed in this session, which will then take us through into the three presentations. The first person that will come into the fourth will be talking and taking us through the history of agriculture and as well as food system in the climate discussion and what to expect in Egypt. Mr. Smith, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Ntombela, for the invitation to speak. And I wish to share my screen so that I can share some of the slides that I've been preparing. So if you could please let me know if the slides are visible in presenter mode and that I'm audible. Then I can proceed with the presentation.
Yes, you are very audible on my side. I hope you are audible to all other colleagues, and your presentation is already showing on my screen.
Great, thank you very much, Dr. Ntombela. So welcome everyone once more to this last session of today. I see that there's great participation over the entire event, so it's very great to see that everyone is so much engaged with African resilient food systems. A special thanks also to FANRPAN to invite Climate to be part of this day. It has been very pleasure to work with you, and I think we can already look back on a great first day of this dialogue. But for this particular session, I'd like to go into the history of agriculture and food systems in climate discussions and what to expect in Egypt. But since I only have 10 minutes, I really like to proceed more to looking towards the future and to the opportunities that we have at the upcoming COP. So that's also why on this first slide, I put a history in between brackets. I will give a very brief overview of last year's COP, the climate conference from the UNFCCC, to see where we what our departure point is in the next COP in Egypt. But then I will really go into more of the opportunities that will arise in 1.5 months' time when the conference is organized in Egypt. So first, a very quick glance at food and agriculture of COP26. So as you can see on the slide, there are different and various initiatives that have been launched in Glasgow last year in the UNFCCC's COP, among which the Glasgow breakthroughs that consists of different strands, also focusing at agriculture, but also climate shot, a global action agenda for innovation in agriculture, a policy action agenda for transition to sustainable food and agriculture, and there are many more on this slide. So as we can see already last year, which is very recent history, there have been many commitments around food and agriculture on the global policy level. But especially that word commitment is something that I would like to challenge today, because COP26 last year has been entitled the Commitment COP. But if we really want to make changes and move towards a more sustainable future, we have to move from commitment to action and implementation. So this is what I would also like to focus on in this presentation today, is how do we get from the commitments that have been made before to really making a difference on the ground. So first, a quick background on why do we need food to be at the center of the table at COP27, so the center of discussion. And this is really looking from a global perspective, I have to say. So food and climate change are intrinsically linked, and this is visible in these three key points that I'm listing here on the slide. First of which is that food production is linked to 35% of greenhouse gas emissions, and therefore really having a strong impact on climate change on a global scale. And under the high emission scenarios, about 10% of current suitable area for major crops and livestock are projected to be climatically unsuitable to produce food in the future. And this is while we're facing growing populations, we actually have less area to produce food on, which is a huge issue. And therefore also it's very necessary to look into these interconnectedness of food production and climate change. And lastly, and I think this is something we all know, is that farmers, especially small-scale producers, are on the front line of climate change. And the African continent, being one that is being hit hardest by climate change, especially small-scale farmers and food producers, are facing the consequences of climate change and are facing therefore also big challenges with making their livelihoods and contributing to sufficient food security. And on top of that, we're also facing a food crisis and food insecurity on a global scale, but also specifically to the African continent, which is also the relevance of this dialogue that FANRPAN is hosting. And then to come to the last and unfortunate point, and this is something that really struck me as well, is that this is actually not really news to most of us. Many people know that food production, food consumption as well, are big portions that contribute to climate change. But still there is limited action that is taking place to really combat it. And therefore I think it's of relevance that we really focus on food at COP27. And this is also what I will continue on in my next slides. So what do we actually need to happen? First of all, I think it's really important that we look into the political will on a national, but also on a global scale. So we do have nationally determined contributions, or NDCs. We have national adaptation plans, but still there's a lot of talk that is happening that what needs to be done. We really need now to move towards implementation and action, which is also why during the photo moment earlier in this event, I wrote down implementation of one of my key messages that we need to address on a global level in order to really get to sustainable food systems and food transformation. Secondly, we need to integrate different sectors. So there are different stakeholder groups that are relevant within the food system, which are, of course, the public sector with governments, multilateral organizations, but also definitely the private sector that plays an important role within the food sector, and also science, obviously. But at the moment, we see that there is a bit of a siloed approach towards working in this food system. Researchers would like to do research, businesses want to do business, and there's very limited interconnectedness between these different stakeholder groups. And therefore, I would like to raise the message and the urgency that we need to break down the silos between different stakeholder groups and really need to work together with different stakeholders to move forward and ensure that our food systems will be more sustainable in the future. Thirdly, I think that there's definitely a need for a change in behavior and in narratives as well. And a behavioral change can be done on an individual level. So thinking about how do I contribute to climate change? What is my footprint? What are my emissions? Am I flying around the world a lot, or am I wasting a lot of food? But also on a global level, I'm really looking into the institutions, the large institutions, on how they go about climate change as a whole. Secondly, under behavioral change, I think there's also opportunities here. So we are talking a lot about crises. There's often food crisis, other crises happening on in the world, climate crisis, but crisis also gives opportunities. So if we do recognize that we are facing a crisis or multiple crises on a global scale or on the African continent, we can also reframe it and see how we can get from that crisis to an opportunity to make changes, as an opportunity to get to transformation. And I'd like to invite everyone here to make that change, this mind shift from thinking about the issues only into looking into the opportunities and solutions in which we can contribute to a more sustainable future there. And also, I think it's extremely important that we focus no longer on the short term, so on quick fixes. We really need to look on the long-term and sustainable solutions to combat climate change. And finally, under behavioral change, I think it's also very relevant to align policies and investments. So we do know that there are funds available on different levels, different scales to combat climate change. But we also need to make sure that we align policies that are being made on different levels, that can be on national level or on a global level, to align with investment programming to make sure that the investments that are there are used for good and are used for sustainable ways to transform food systems. And then finally, to add to that, I think it's very relevant that we also have accountability mechanisms. So we have seen all these commitments that have been made at COP. There are commitments being made in the Paris Agreements and the NDCs and the NUPs. But who is checking that actually the commitments that have been made are being followed up on? So I think it's very relevant that next to commitments, we need also accountability mechanisms to really make sure that these commitments are being followed up on. And then we also need to map how that leads to implementation on the ground. So going into the opportunities for this year at COP in Egypt, I think there are three different ways in which there are opportunities if we look on a global level or on a high level policy level. First of which is that this year's COP, as I mentioned before, is focusing much more on implementation than a previous one. So the last COP has been entitled a bit as the Commitment COP. We've seen all the initiatives that have been launched in Glasgow last year. And now in Egypt, under the Egyptian presidency at COP, we see that they have a strong focus on implementation and action. I think this is a great opportunity to really make sure that we shift our behavior, or we shift our narrative from thinking about solutions to actually implementing solutions. So this is also going back to the second bullet on solutions. We shouldn't only focus on what are the issues that we're facing, we should also really focus on what are the solutions to those issues that we're facing and how can we implement them on the ground. Then a second opportunity that I see is also that the presidency, so Egyptian presidency this year, they do show a very strong focus on food and agriculture in their initiative this year. So from the top of my head, I believe that they are launching at least 17 or perhaps 18 different initiatives, two of which that are really focusing a lot on food and agriculture, which is firstly the Food and Agriculture for Sustainable Transformation Initiative, or FAST to say it in short, but also an initiative on climate action and nutrition. So nutrition also being an important part of food, obviously. And in my next slide, I will go a little bit deeper into the first of these two, the FAST initiative, on how the Egyptian presidency envisions to really launch this initiative to make a difference on the ground. And lastly, as an opportunity, I see also, and this also links actually to the previous 2 points, is the presidency's program, which reiterates the importance and the urgency that the Egyptian presidency for COP this year sees in addressing adaptation, agriculture, and food systems, as they have scheduled a full day as part of the high-level presidency's program to focus on these issues around adaptation, agriculture, and food systems. So we do see that this the intrinsic motivation is there from the current COP presidency, and we will see in Sharm el-Sheikh later this year to how that further materializes towards implementation. So going a little bit deeper into the first of the two initiatives that I mentioned on the previous slide, the FAST initiative, and that seeks to improve the quantity but also the quality of climate finance contributions to transform agriculture and food systems. So we have heard my colleague, Dr. Bruce Campbell, earlier in this event today, talking, and he actually also wrote a discussion starter on the costs for food systems transformation on a global scale, in which he gives a rough estimation of the quantity of finance needed to transform food systems. So we do have an estimation there, but then secondly, you also need to have qualitative funding programs to align this funding that is there into efficient programs, funding programs to address climate change. So it's not just the quantity, it's also the quality aspect. And I think it's very important that this initiative actually addresses both of these. So the initiative is built around 3 pillars. So access to finance is the first one, to enhance country capacities in identifying and formulating the support that they need to get to implementation. So here again, we see the strong link between the accessibility and the availability of funding that is there on a global scale that needs to be aligned and linked to implementation on the ground in different countries. But it also focuses on knowledge and capacity. So also as a platform to share knowledge, to share capacity from different contexts, different localities or regions, in how good practices and lessons come about from this initiative and how they can bring together different relevant lessons from different funding programs on how to move forward in financing, efficiently financing climate change combatants. Lastly, on policy dialogues, is a section of the initiative that wants to facilitate better understanding of country priorities. So as we all know, different localities face different challenges. There are particular global challenges to climate change, but also definitely different countries or different regions within countries face different challenges. So it's extremely important that we map these differences and that we also make sure that the finance that comes in on different levels aligns or links strongly to the context on the ground in which the implementation needs to happen. Then next to the overarching presidency initiatives, there are other activities that are being organized at COP this year. One way in which different organizations are doing this is by organizing pavilions. And I think a very interesting observation to be made this year is that many parties from the global area that work around food and climate have come together to organize pavilions at COP around food challenges. And actually, I believe that this is the first year, the 27th edition of COP, in which pavilions are actually organized that will focus around food. So this also gives, again, a strong message that not only the Egyptian presidency for COP this year, but also the global community sees this relevance to address food at COP. And there are different pavilions that are being organized, and I will go quickly go through them here. First of all, the Food Systems Pavilion. I address this specifically because Climate is one of the key organizers for this team to organize this Food Systems Pavilion at COP. And as a pavilion, we really want to focus on accelerating action on food for people and planet. So really get back to this implementation and action-oriented approach towards food systems transformation. And in order to do so, we have a few different ways in which we try also to distinguish ourselves on how we want to tackle food systems transformation. First of which is by having unconventional partners. And this also goes back to my call to de-silo the climate change work on a global scale. And in order to do this, we have invited over 20 different organizations that are operating worldwide to come together as co-hosts or as conveners of this pavilion and to jointly work together and to jointly engage in a discussion or dialogue on how to move forward. And these partners, they include the public sector, but definitely also private sector. But also we give room, or we have inclusivity of farmer representatives and youth representatives. So we really try to approach the food systems transformation in a holistic manner from a systems approach to make sure that we have all the communities coming together that face food challenges on a global scale, to make sure that the solutions that we propose are applicable to all and that no one is being left behind. And secondly, next to the partnerships, we also really want to focus on solutions again. So like I mentioned before, there has been a lot of talk, there has been a lot of commitments. Now it's the time for us to go to implementation, to solution-driven thinking, to actions on the ground. And therefore, this pavilion that we are organizing with our partners is also really focusing on how do we get to solutions, which solutions are already there for different local contexts in the world, and how can we get to new solutions that will work for different stakeholder groups as well. And so next to our own pavilion that we are organizing with different partners, there are also different pavilions around at COP, and I've listed them here below. So Food for Climate Pavilion, the Food and Agriculture Pavilion, but also the Agri-Food Systems in the Americas Pavilion. So here we see really this call from a global community that there is a need to address food and food systems during the climate COP, the climate conference this year in Egypt. And I'd just like to close out my final slide here with actually a call to everyone that is engaged in this dialogue today. So as a pavilion, we are organizing a range of different topics, a range of different days. I've listed them here, all linked to food systems, many also focusing or linking towards agriculture actually. But we're not yet there. We do have the funding, we do have partners, but there are definitely things that we miss to really get our pavilion to be inclusive and to address all the needs and solutions that we need to move towards sustainable food systems transformation. And I listed them here. So one thing that I think is extremely relevant, and I'm quite self-critical here as well, is that we definitely need a stronger voice from stakeholders and groups from the global south, so including the African continent, to be engaged in the dialogue at our program at the pavilion, to make sure that we don't only focus on solutions that are linked to vertical farming, for example, that might be applicable for countries as the USA or the Netherlands, where I'm from, but we really also need to focus on a global solutions or regional solutions that also fit within the context of different countries. So therefore, I would really like to call upon everyone here as well that will be attending COP to really raise your voice and try to get engagement with either our pavilion or with one of the other pavilions that I've shown, to really make sure that we have these voices included in the dialogues. And the same actually goes for indigenous communities. So I mentioned that we do have smallholder producers that will be part of the discussions through farmer organizations. We'll have youth representatives there as well, but I do think that especially also indigenous communities are relevant to include in the dialogue, since they are often already marginalized in policy discussions, and we really have to make sure that we don't leave anyone else behind. And finally, I'd like to call out for support from country governments. So as a global community, we have shown by the different pavilions that we are organizing that we see the urgency for food systems and food in general and agriculture to be addressed at COP this year. And now we really need countries to step up to get engaged with all the calls that are being out there already in the lead up to COP, and make sure that they also feed in to their NDCs, their NABs, and make sure that they support all these organizations that are working towards food systems transformation, to make sure that on country level, they can contribute and therefore also combat climate change that is linked to food and agriculture. So with that, it's my call really upon all the attendees here to make sure that you're getting engaged. This is a huge opportunity for everyone to get into the dialogue and the discussion around climate change in food and agriculture. So thank you very much for your patience with me and for listening to my presentation. And I wish you a very nice remainder of the event. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that informative presentation, Weber. I would like to then open up for one or two questions, very brief one, if there's any reflection on the presentation that has been done from the Smith, or before we take on our diplomat, Annie, to take us into the next one. Just a brief one. I see Oseim. You can go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, Sifiso, and thank you very much, Weber, for your presentation. I very much like it, and I know a little bit about climate. I was very eager to hear the history of agriculture and food security at the COP, but I didn't hear what happened in the Africa Pavilion of COP17 in Durban, which for me was the place where heads of states and government came up to also make these very verbose commitments and discussions about keeping Africa food secure and all of that. And that was set also in the context of MDGs that was supposed to expire in 2015. But I find us again in 2022 with SDG looking at us 8 years ahead. And I hear myself, I'm hearing a repetition of what I heard 10 years ago in Durban. My question and concern, I mean, when we're going to Sharm el-Sheikh, it's important that indeed Africa has a common voice, and we need to find something more pragmatic that will make the COP to deliver what we want for Africa. Because all that I'm hearing now, really, if you ask me, I heard them 10 years ago. And it seems that we probably need something more than what I am hearing, but I don't know it. I don't know it, but I'm really one of those preparing to go to Sharm el-Sheikh and not to come back the same. So I'm very eager to also partner with you. I know a few of your colleagues, Bruce, Dinesh, we're working and talking together. I would like to also engage in a very pragmatic, meaningful way that can help Africa make a leapfrog coming back from Sharm el-Sheikh. So I hope that really we can do something, but I also like to ask the question, where is the role of science in all of this? Because we cannot aim for these transformations without science. Back to you, Sifiso, and thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Osemi. And I think your call and your request for that collaboration in strengthening the common vision or the common submission of Africa in the next COP7 will certainly be taken forward by those that are involved. I think Smith take into account also the comments that you have provided to them. With that, colleagues, I don't see any other hand. That I would like to then invite I would like to then invite our next speaker, Rafik Aini, to then talk to us specifically on the Africa's priorities. And I think we'll be building up in some of the consistent message that we have heard throughout the day of really moving beyond just the commitments and prioritizing the implementation of some of the areas that we consider as solution. And I think that was also the point we are really elevating, Osim, to that we don't run that risk of repeating the things that we have already committed when we were in COP17 in Durban. Rafik?
Thank you very much, Dr. Thank you, Dr. Sifiso, for your guidance, and thanks also to Mr. Wilby Smith. You really facilitate to me the road. It's a good presentation, it's very useful. And thanks to OCME also, it's a hard question, so he can find some response. So as you know, agriculture with the Cornelia Jones work on agriculture established in Bonn Fiji COP 23 under the decision 4/CP23. So 6 workshops on different thematics and topics, and another from New Zealand. We said workshop of New Zealand, it's divided in 2 slots, so 8 workshops. If we add the 5 last workshops from Durban to the Cornelia Jones work, 13 workshops. Donc we discuss as for the scientific issue. So for us as AGN, the target of all this is at COP27, a COP decision. And with what we need from this COP decision, what must capture from the reports, and what we need to report to COP from these workshops. The first. The second part, the future of agriculture. It's very, very important for us. The future, how to remain agriculture within the negotiation of UNFCCC. It's very important. So for us as AGN, needed for a clear decision with common page. So agriculture discussion have been in the UNFCCC process for a long time, with a large part focusing on workshops and knowledge sharing. A lot of work was done, as I said before. Amount of knowledge and information was available. So, focus remained on scientific and technology aspect, with no accompanying implementation. So how to unlock implementation? For us, it's necessary for entity on agriculture to continue working within the UNFCCC. And we are in line with G77 in China proposal, saying that continue work on agriculture issue that start in 2012 under the UNFCCC and called for moving to implementation, proceed through a permanent body such as a group of experts or standing committee and for sustainable means of implementation to developing countries. For us, the name it's not important, but we need something to remain agriculture in the process. The AGN position in the view was that continuing to conduct technical workshops is very important for us. But those workshops should guide on the way forward by implementing the recommendation and move forward way for modality and emphasis on adaptation. For AGN, now it's an excellent opportunity for Africa to see consolidation of issues of agriculture in UNFCCC process within view of strengthening institutional arrangement to facilitate implementation. As you know, the Coroniva is ended and we are in Africa. It's Cup of Africa. So we need action on the ground. Second, how to more engage SBI in agriculture. Indeed, technical issues were done, but with the substar, but no under SBI. It's very critical. Third, how to build the joint action strategy responding to the needs of agriculture. For us, the climate finance is the Achilles heel. Indeed, for the 1 billion should come from state finance of the developed country. It's their responsibility to involve or not the private sector. It's not our problem. So they are pushing us to integrate the private sector. As you know, for adaptation, and agriculture in Africa need more adaptation than mitigation, and there is no profit for them. So there is this issue need to be resolved. Also, with the respect of in a balanced way, 2020 between adaptation and mitigation. So as a conclusion, we could be remarkably close to agree on how to continue our work on agriculture in coordination with the G77 in China, united. I think that KGWA will succeed if it can create conditions to mobilize resources for implementation, not only finance. Capacity building for us, it's very important. The first step to engage projects, to implement projects, is capacity building of stakeholders, the small farmers. So the implementation will be at a country level, and the assistance to farmers to adopt better technologies and practice, taking into account the diversity of agrosystems of Africa. Thank you very much. Up to you, Doctor.
Thank you very much for those very brief and straightforward priorities that you have highlighted, Mr. Aini. I think you really elevated the issue of that collaborative and starting on the financing from the developed nations in upscaling some of those solutions which we have been unpacking throughout the session. Ladies and gentlemen, before I move into the closure of the session, I just want to raise the opportunity for one or two hands. I know we are slightly out of time, but we can, if one have a very brief reflection or addition that wants to add before we move to closure. I see the hand of Rolf.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Dr. Worth. I was just trying to emphasize the point that I was making in the chat that, you know, if you focus on food, you can get into a lot of different conflicts because there's so many interests around food. But if you focus on soil, then you really are addressing everybody's interests because it's water, it's more effective rainfall, it's more plant growth, more biodiversity, more food, fiber, and energy. So that's really my appeal, is that we try and focus on the root cause of the problem, which is soil. And soil is really, it's becoming clear that that is the only way we can really soak up all this carbon and water, which is causing climate change. So that was just my contribution. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Rolf. Ladies and gentlemen, we have then certainly then come to the end of day one, and I would like to thank every speaker, every contributor, and
I think we have lost Dr. Ntombela. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I think all you wanted to say, we have come to the end of this session. We meet again tomorrow at 10 o'clock for day 2 and proceed. Thank you very much for being on the platform. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.